Okay. I'll open this meeting of a special board meeting of the Eugene 4J School Board of Directors. It's Wednesday, March 30th, 2022, and it is 5:34. We have all 5 board members present. In person, we have Gordon Lafer, Laurel O'Rourke, Maya Rabasa, Judy Newman, and on Zoom we have Alicia Hayes. So tonight we have a special board meeting, and we have a few tasks at hand. First of all, we want to review and discuss the board vacancies coming up. We want to discuss our process and our timeline for filling those vacancies. We want to talk about the superintendent timeline and next steps. And we want to elect a board vice chair to fill the vacancy Martina Shabram has created. And we want to just talk about our next meetings. We want to talk about getting information and how we want to proceed with mental health and social emotional services for the district and other agenda items. So that's our plan for tonight. So I just walked through the agenda. Are there any questions or changes or corrections to the agenda?
Did we want to move up something? You had talked about something. Hi, Alicia.
I have a,
did we want to, you
I
guys
just have-
were going to move something up, I thought, or not? Was that the time to do that?
I guess I have a, sorry.
But Laurel, what is it that you want to move up?
Well, I was watching your meeting yesterday, so I thought you had decided something around that. Maybe I was mistaken, and if so, I'm sorry.
The superintendent search meeting?
Mm-hmm.
I don't think they're decisions, we're just going to get an update at this point, the timeline. Were you thinking specifically?
It was something that was an item that was later in the agenda that you two should have written this down. Please.
I remember, and I think it's, so it was I see it is off of the agenda now, but I assume it will take place under item 3.1, but it was about restructuring our board. Because remember, it was later and you had suggested for logistics to move it up. Is that what you're talking about?
So restructuring our what?
The board, the leadership, the question that you just mentioned.
Oh, yes, no, we kept it as an item for action for the vice chair election.
Yes.
Okay?
Yeah.
So it is an item for
It
action.
is, now I see it, it's just.
Organize the board
it was
of
kept in the
directors.
order, which is fine.
Yeah, we kept the order because it was an item for action.
Okay.
That was, okay?
Thank you.
Everyone okay with that, Gordon?
Thank you. So my question is just about the first item about the school vacancy appointment, which is, I thought that we need to actually make a decision about saying, okay, we're gonna go forward on this timetable and in this way. And so then I just wondered if that needs to be an item for action as opposed to just information.
I think it's just an item for information. I think we'll agree. The next steps are pretty much set out in law, and if we do have to move it to something we have to vote on, I think it's pretty straightforward.
Okay.
So,
Okay.
why don't we just hold that right? If we have to move something to action, we'll do it then.
No problem.
But I think it is just information at this point. Okay? Then I'm gonna say the agenda, it stands as it's written, with the clarifications. All right. So, first item is an item for information, receiving an update on the school board vacancies. So I know originally I was under the impression that I thought we had a vote to say, yeah, we declare these vacant, but people have resigned and apparently we just have to announce and declare them vacant. So we have 2 positions. We have position 7, which was Mary Walston's, and that was vacant as of March 21st was her resignation effective. And then we have the second position, which is position 5, it's Martina Shabram's which is vacant as of today. And I think everyone received those letters of resignation, so that makes it official. And so tonight we want to talk about sort of the process. There are some things that are specified in both our board policy but also in state law about how to move forward to complete those, to fill those vacancies. Both of the position 5 and position 7, whoever we appoint will be in that position until June 30th of 2023. So both of those positions are then open for the elections. And so in state law, we have to open this up and take applications for at least 20 days is what the timeline is. And then people who live given they're all at-large positions, anyone that lives within the 4J School District boundaries and is eligible to vote would be eligible to apply for those positions. So that's what I know, and then I've asked, Carrie Delph is gonna walk us through what we've done in the past, and I think you got today in your email, in your mail, the questions that we asked the last time this was open. And Christine Nesbitt, thank you.
Thank you. So this is something that the board has encountered before, a vacancy on the board midterm. The board has an established process and there are some pretty straightforward elements to going forward with this. The district will post the position and share the information widely. Board members can also share the information widely and individually about how people can apply. We have established an online application form as the lowest barrier method to folks being able to apply for the position, but certainly we can also provide assistance with accommodations if needed or a print version of that application if preferred. But everybody in the past has applied online. We have looked at the timeline. In the past that has been opened up for a period of at least 3 or 4 weeks, a good amount of time for the community to become aware of the openings and put together their application, decide to put their name in the ring and put their application together. There are some areas of state law that talk about a 20-day timeline. It's not entirely clear that that applies to this particular situation where we have a school board that is not elected by specific zones, but it's a good practice to allow enough time for community members to learn about the opportunity and sign up for the next steps rather than having too short of a time period. So the next would be opening up the position, opening up the vacancies in the application for community members to submit their apps immediately. They could open that and publicize it starting tomorrow, and closing 3 weeks out from that would be, or just shy of 3 weeks out from that would be April 20th. And then the board would need to discuss and determine the timeline for the next steps. What's happened in the past is that the board has decided to interview applicants for the school board. You receive a significant amount of information that they put together in an application, but it's also good to learn more and have some more information about the people applying for the openings, and it's an important decision to make. So having that additional information has been a part of the process. The last time there was an opening, the board interviewed every applicant in a brief series of interviews, with about 10 minutes apiece, then selected finalists to consider for appointment, interviewed those finalists, and then voted to make the decision. Previous points, applicants for the school board and the budget committee simply came and presented a few minutes to the school board, and previous boards have deemed that inadequate to learning about the applicants for the position. So a determination would need to be made about how much time to give that, when that could be. One possible timeline could be to close the application, have the deadline be April 20th. The following Wednesday is a time that is held on people's calendars for a board meeting or work session, and could do interviews on April 27th is one possibility, and be voting to appoint new board members at the following regular board meeting, which is May 4th. If the board wanted to have a faster timeline than that, certainly you could add meetings other than those Wednesdays, but that would just require coordinating calendars, of course. There is no statutory requirement for a waiting period or any delay before, once the vacancies exist, they can be opened up. And then once the decision is made of who to appoint, those people can be sworn in and begin their new roles promptly without a waiting period after that. And then they will serve through the end of the next period, ending after the next school board election, which is, the election is in May 2023, and the positions would be appointed through June of 2023, when the new people were re-elected to take their positions. We have the process established. We've shared the questions that were asked in the most recent recruitment, which were similar to what had been asked before, but some small adjustments were made that time, and we can make adjustments again this time if desired. But the standard, the basic information about how to apply is ready to share out to the community when the board is ready.
Thank you. So do we have any questions? Laura?
If it's not a 20-day standard, I know very few job openings that are open for that amount of time. So I would say if we were able to close earlier and have interviews before on that week of the 20th, then we can move this timeline up. So if that is not the law, then I suggest we don't have to keep that open for 20 days, because nobody, and if we get everything out, get all the information out across all channels. So.
Can you respond?
Yeah.
Thank you.
I don't think that it is for a non-zone situations. We've got an at-large voting elector, so it shouldn't apply.
So there's no minimum?
The 20-day window does not apply.
My point was, we could end up with 50 applicants with a 20-day window. And that, I've been there, it's not good.
Gordon?
Thanks. I guess my main concern is that we get through this in time for the new people to participate in the superintendent hiring process. And my memory was that Alma had wanted to do that by the first week in May, either the end of April or the first week in May. I might be wrong, so I guess my inclination would be to try to figure out a way to let that happen, which might be having less than 20 days if we have like a really aggressive outreach to publicize this. I guess you and I and Alicia online are the only ones who've been through this before. My memory is that even without 50, if we got 25, because we didn't want to interview 25, then there was like an intermediate step of narrowing down. Although I also remember the interviews not being very useful, because it was like go and ended up being kind of, I don't remember learning much more than we learned from the written application. So like, I'd kind of like to give people the opportunity to talk to us, but when you have, okay, we need to ask you these 4 questions and you need to answer them, and you have 90 seconds for each question, maybe we can cut that out.
So, okay, so a couple of things. One is, I think your question about Alma, and yes, I think you're right, and we'll be looking at that. So the final selection of a superintendent, so the finalist round would probably be the last week. It was the last week in April, first week in May at the very latest. So that was their window, and then we would be selecting. The first round was originally scheduled for the first week in April. We're pushing it to the second. So does that answer your question about that?
Yeah, and I guess for me, it'd be good for them to be able to participate in the finalist round of interviews, and I know the round before that will be
Yeah.
recorded, so people can watch the recordings, but the finalist so I guess that means it would be good for us to be, I would like us to be able to make our decision before the first week of May, whatever, by the last day of April or something.
So can I ask how long we advertised last time? Does anyone know?
I should have looked at that previously. It's always been a longer period than we may be talking about here, at least 3 weeks. However, given that there is a tight timeline, one possible shortened timeline, if not adhering to a 20-day or 3-week minimum, one possible alternate timeline could be to would suggest closing the position on the 18th and interviewing on the 20th. Staff could turn that around. The one concern or consideration is that if there is a very, very large number of applications, then that narrowing process would also need to happen. So if the board were prepared to hold a special meeting if need be to make that decision about narrowing to the finalist applicants, could be a short noon meeting or 5 p.m. meeting, however that fit calendars, that could be done between that point and the 20th and hold interviews in a work session on the 20th. That could be a possibility to consider. Another alternative is to close the application on the 15th to give a few more days for that consideration and that process. It just gives less time for the community. So it's a balancing of those priorities.
Right. I think Alicia's got her hand up.
Thanks, Judy. Couple things. One, it's been discussed that we should have these folks on for the hiring. And I guess I would just like affirmation or affirm, there's another word, just to make sure this board, even if it's with the thumbs up, that we're all in agreement on that, so that we, when we process times, we process with that understanding. Does that make sense, Judy?
Yeah.
It's kind of the first hurdle. I think, just listening, I think we'll probably all agree, but I would just like it affirmed, if you would.
Do you have thoughts of it, about that or not?
I think I could argue either way. I just don't feel like arguing. I don't want. I think it's, it's hard because they won't have seen the interviews, but they do have access online. We had a discussion about these are the folks that will be working with the superintendent. So I will give it a thumbs up if that's what you asked for, Judy, thumbs up or down as to whether we get these folks on board and adjust our schedule with the hiring. So I just wanted us as a board to affirm that instead of just assume that. Does that make sense?
Yep, that does. And I know you talked about it. Or does anyone else want to comment on that? Maya, you have your.
I'm just waiting it wasn't about that specifically. I think I fall in the same category as Alicia. I could see both ways. But I do think that it makes sense to try to get this done ahead of time for a couple of reasons. One, mostly so that we would have the chance for 7 of us to deliberate over the qualities and vision we have for a superintendent. And with the first round of interviews being available in recorded form, I feel more comfortable. When I didn't process that detail, I was a little hesitant. I would support pushing us so that we get it done ahead of time. But I do have some other questions that now come back afterwards.
Let's just, Laurel, did you have a comment?
Yes, I support that. I think it's imperative. I think we are a 7-person board and we're not right now. And I think it's important to have, there's a reason we have that many people. And I think I liked Carrie's idea of the 15th. I know we had several ideas, but that's one of the ones I liked because I feel like that makes less of a squeeze on staff, but also it gives more time for planning, because it involves calling people and things like that. I would like to talk about the process and the questions at some point and things like that. But I agree with what Alicia said, and in that I think it should happen with several people.
Gordon, you already gave a thumbs up.
Yeah, I was already thinking of
Okay,
other things.
so it sounds like we're in agreement that we want to advertise for 2 weeks at least, which would be the 15th, right?
So
So-
I position open for 2 weeks, applications open and closing on the 15th.
Judy,
Yes,
can I point out that's Good Friday? I don't know, I know for me, that's, I would hate for that to be 5 o'clock on a Good Friday. Can we close it on the 14th? So I was just gonna propose that we close it on the 14th. If you guys wanna close it on the 15th, that's fine. But I just wanted to point that out, that we hold our first interviews on the 20th, so we can let people know. I think it's important that we pick the date, that right now, when we advertise, so people could clear their calendars, that we hold our interviews on the 20th, we make our decision on the 27th. If we have to reconvene with a few finalists, we can do that on the 27th. And then we will be good to go with those folks on board for the interviews on the first week. And if you don't want to do it on the 27th, then we could do it on the 4th, with understanding that the interviews would then need to be on the week of the 9th. Just wanted to put that out.
that's a good suggestion. So I think, let me just point out that I think whoever we seat on the board has to have time, and I don't want to push back the the decision about the search I was just thinking about May 1st May 4th gives me a little bit of heartburn, that's all.
I'm confused, but you,
So
Gordon,
Thanks. I'm glad you pointed out the thing about Good Friday, Alicia. If we're gonna do it on the 15th, I actually would move it to the 18th, just to, people are busy, sometimes the weekend actually is a good time to be able to remember and get things done, even if we're able to get done. And it doesn't really make a difference. It makes a difference to us. I'd like to go to the 20th and the 20th and making a final decision on the 27th. My only question is about if we're gonna have to do the step of narrowing down, if we get 30 applicants and we want to interview 12 people or something. And so this is partly a legal question. I have a vague memory that we once did this online or something without a meeting. If my memory is right, did we break the law, or is there any flexibility in how we can handle that?
I don't consider it a best practice to do voting that way at all. My recommendation is to narrow it in a different fashion. Each individual member could potentially narrow it to submit their two to staff for interviews, and then you could have a pool of finalists for interviews. That would be one option. But yeah, you really do need to be present to vote.
And we've received the same guidance, just confirming that, we've received the same guidance from the State School Boards Association, Wincheck specifically, which is why we don't use that practice anymore. It's convenient, but for the public process, one way would be to essentially do that survey in a brief public special session, providing that input. Another, as Christine noted, would be to have each board member choose a couple of top candidates. Some ways to narrow are possible. If it closed at midnight on Sunday or 8 a.m. on Monday, something along those lines, it does make for quite a tight turnaround for Wednesday interviews is the one consideration with that. However, if there's a really efficient narrowing mechanism in place, it could be done. It also could be done to share all applications received as of Thursday with the board, and then share any additional applications received over the weekend with the board, so that you're not waiting to begin reviewing the applications received, that could be also help with just to smooth that timeline.
Great, thank you. That was gonna be my question. I see Maya's up and then.
Yeah, I wasn't a member of the board during the last appointment process, but I was a member of the pool of applicants, and so I have a different perspective on it, and I disagree a little bit toward it. I recall that they rolled in, which I think was something that was requested by a member of the public. We can look back at that, but
It's not my recollection, but we
Okay.
certainly could look back, yeah.
because I recall checking a lot. I also, there wasn't a narrowing down. Everybody was offered the opportunity for an interview, and I'm reluctant to dismiss the importance of the interview because it demonstrates a different skill set, and we'd be filtering through potential candidates based on their writing skill set and not offering people the opportunity to demonstrate their themselves in an oral capacity. And I think that it would be it would leave us with less of a whole vision of each of the candidates. So 3 minutes maybe on that side of the table feels like not very much time, but it felt like eternity on the other side. And I think also one of the challenges is being able to speak your piece in a timely manner. And I think that that's an important thing for us to see demonstrated is, you know, you have 4 questions, you have this much time. Show us how you manage your time in a public setting when you're speaking. So I would argue that I certainly hope we don't get 50 candidates because that's a whole lot of time. But I would argue that there's a lot of benefit to be had from allowing everybody to have an opportunity to interview and then narrowing it down, which I'm pretty sure is what happened with the last round. I think every candidate that submitted an application was offered an interview, and then it was narrowed down to 3.
Alicia's had her hand up and then Laurel, and then Gordon. Okay, Alicia.
Thank you, Judy. Here's something, it sounds kind of silly, but used to be when we did this, we did it all in one night. So we interviewed and then voted. I know, probably won't happen with 2 positions. But I just want to support what Maya said. I think we should give everybody a chance. Also, it used to be that I just sound old, I know, but it was that you didn't have questions, the same question that they came up with the budget committee, but that you spoke about why you wanted to be on the board. So it gave them more gives the candidates or the applicants more flexibility to drill down a little more about who they are and why they want to be on the board versus some questions. So those are just some thoughts. Also, Judy, I don't know if we want to see if people are available on the 21st. So, you know, I know that's asking a lot, but this is a big deal. Instead of the 20th, I just worry we aren't going to have enough time. So,
Yeah.
my 2 thoughts.
That's why I pulled up my calendar. Go ahead, Laurel.
So, I think we're all kind of agreeing in a lot of
Yeah.
ways, which is good to hear. That's always helpful. I liked Alicia's idea of the 14th. If it gets posted tomorrow, that is 2 weeks, isn't it? Am I correct in seeing that way? So if it closed at the end of that's a Thursday, I believe, then that's exactly 2 weeks. And then we're not hitting Passover or Good Friday, which is, had no idea, but it's good to know. The other thing is I like the idea of scheduling interviews like in either, if it's a lot, 2 consecutive days or 1 day. I don't know, I haven't looked, I should have looked what we're bumping as far as a work session on the 20th. If we do that, or were there other interviews on the 20th?
Well, we haven't set the interviews yet. Those will be done individually. We're looking at our timeline after. So the interviews the first round interviews, Laurel, to your question, should be the week of the 11th.
Okay, that's
So
what I was
before,
thinking,
yeah.
okay. So, I'm sure we're bumping something that's dear to my heart on the 20th.
Bumping a lot.
I'm willing to do that in order for the need to get things done. So that's my 2 cents. Thanks. I'm sorry for not turning that on. Alicia, apologize.
Laurel, I mean Laurel, I'm looking at Gordon going Laurel.
Looks just like
Gordon.
I'm convinced, you convinced me, Maya.
Okay.
And I am free on the 21st. I also like Alicia's idea of having people, of just giving people 3 minutes to say whatever they want to say. If we have so many people, either we don't think we can do it, or we don't think it's fair to like the last 10 people to not really have our attention, and we want to split it into 2 nights, I can do that on the 21st. And I also do, I remember that that at first it was thought that the applications were not public record, and then there was some records request, and it was ruled that they are public record. And so assuming that that's true, the idea of getting them on a rolling basis would be good, just to enable board members to be, to manage it on whatever timetable works for each of us leading up to that.
Applications are public record, they are posted publicly, and certainly we could do that on a rolling basis, and it really could help avoid that squeeze at the end of trying to review them all. Just to back up about 10 minutes here and provide an answer, the previous time of posting is 6.5 weeks long. Clearly, there's not enough time for that to meet all the goals of the boardings.
I'm leaning towards the 18th for a couple of reasons. One is I don't think, even if we did on the 15th, not everyone celebrates Passover or Good Friday, so it doesn't mean you have to sit. It's not like we're requiring anything on that day, it just gives one more time. But I like having 2 weekends for people to think about this, because if we just do it now, it's really just, I mean, they're just gonna hear about it, the word's just gonna get out. So I would go with that, but still keep with our timeline. If we can get the applications on a rolling basis, I feel like we could keep up with them. I don't know that we're gonna get that many at the last minute, so.
Or are you gonna answer to, my question is what does that mean for staff?
So again, staff can be doing some work on this on a rolling basis. The bigger consideration with that type of a turnaround is simply that if the board wants to narrow to a smaller pool of candidates, that needs to happen in that time period, and then staff need to contact all of the people who are going to be interviewed and arrange their times. If the board were prepared to receive the final applications as of 8 a.m. Monday, for example, receive those in the morning, have a decision about which people were going to be finalists by late on Monday, we certainly could move forward with that. It would just be a crunch, but it can be done.
And in our advertising, we could let people know that's the date, because everyone's gonna get that time, so reserve it. So yeah, I think we have Maya and then Gordon.
So
No, Alicia was before both of them.
I don't know who was first. Alicia, were you up there first? Go ahead, we'll go Alicia, Maya, Gordon.
All right, let me make an attempt at something here. So just a thought, we could, some of us could meet earlier on the 20th. I don't know if everybody could, like at 4 o'clock. I think we could go with the applicants due by the 18th. And when you turn in your application, since I don't believe this board is interested in narrowing who turns in an application, we're interested in hearing everybody. There doesn't have to be any narrowing. So you turn in your application. When you turn in your application, the sooner you get it, the sooner you get to pick a time. So turn in your app, get a time. And then everybody would take a little workload off of staff for calling back, because you could maybe put it online somehow, turn in your app, pick a time. So I would like to suggest that we go with the 20th, that we turn in applications at 8 o'clock on the 18th. We interview on the 20th. If people could come early, I don't know if people could, like a 4 o'clock start time. That because Laura was asking what was on the agenda. That's a regular meeting, and that's our only regular meeting in April. So we might want to hold on to that. And then check and see if people could make the 24th if we get an overflow, and just hold it for an overflow. But I think when I'm listening to everybody, that gets at everybody's schedule, and everybody's committed to hearing everybody is what I've been listening to. So those are my thoughts, Judy.
Thank you, Maya.
I fully agree. I mean, anybody can submit an intention to run, when they run in an election. So to not allow everybody the opportunity to be considered an equal candidate would make me feel very uncomfortable. So I appreciate that for sure. You're very nice for offering people the first come, first pick, because I remember being told, this is your interview time. And that was my interview time, and I made it happen because I was told to keep my day open between that time. So I could go either way. I could leave it up to the folks to maneuver as they need to, and I'm also open to Alicia's, but I think that if we advertise it saying be available during this time, and that is one of the requirements, that's part of the job. Like, we get told by Judy, be available on Wednesdays, and my calendar is now free on Wednesdays, despite things that I very much want to do sometimes on a Wednesday. So I don't mean to sound harsh about it, but I do want to point that out. This is for a Wednesday, so it is literally occurring on the day that we ask people to be available when they are in the role. This is going way back a little bit, and it's I assume it'll happen, but I need to say it out loud. I'm assuming that we will offer the application, you're nodding, you know what I'm gonna say, in Spanish, and a blurb about that statement being able to be translated if folks come in needing to deliver that statement in Spanish.
Yes, as well as information about who to contact for any other accommodations.
I appreciate that, thank you.
So let me just, Gordon,
No,
go
you
ahead.
can go ahead, I'll go after you.
I just want to follow up on Alicia's suggestion about being available a little bit earlier on the 20th. Is that possible, maybe 4 o'clock with people's schedules? Because that would buy us a little extra time, a whole hour and a half on that day.
With an additional note, which may not be needed, but the board quorum is 4. If one person couldn't attend, they could catch up on the video of the interviews later if that were absolutely necessary.
Gordon?
Yeah,
Just check.
I can also.
Okay, so let's think about that. Gordon, go ahead.
All sounds good to me. I don't, if we could have something where people pick their times, maybe that takes some burden off of staff if it's kind of automated in that way. And the only thing about, how harsh you are, Maya, is I think we want to allow people who have to feed their kids dinner or whatever, right? Maybe if they become on the board, then they make some other arrangement, which means I'm good with starting at 4 p.m., but I want to make sure that we have slots, obviously, like that allow people to do it later. And then my one other thought is that it seems like a good possibility that this is all we're going to be able to do on the 20th. And so then if that, I want to be prepared for if that happens, that we can use the 27th, not just to take this vote, but also to do some of the regular business that might otherwise have happened on the 20th.
Yeah, that's great. We have many Wednesdays where we seem to add things in, so great suggestion. Go ahead, Laurel.
If we change a scheduled board meeting, we have to have a vote on that. So, and if we're changing to not have the scheduled regular board meeting on that day, then we need to talk about what that means.
Good point. We wouldn't know till the 18th, so I would say, let me just think about let's talk about now the process about how long initial interviews have to be. Christine, go ahead. No.
I'm not sure it's needed.
Okay, great. So we have a tentative plan. The application will go out tomorrow and will be posted, and it will close on April 18th at 8 a.m. And we're gonna get applications as they come in so that we can keep up on this. And then the 20th, we're gonna start at 4 o'clock, and everyone's gonna get, we still haven't decided the process, let's say, 3 minutes or whatever to introduce themselves. And then we're gonna after that, we'll have a chance to get down to the finalists, and we'll be doing the finalist interviews, I think on the 27th is what we're saying now, unless we wanna do something before that.
finalists for this?
Finalists for the, this position.
Do we?
I don't
I
know
will
if
just
that's
speak up.
necessary.
Oh, you're thinking that we're just gonna do the first round and then choose?
Yeah.
Okay, let's talk a little bit more about that. Gordon?
I was thinking the same thing. I don't remember us doing 2 rounds. I don't, we did do 2 rounds? I should ask
We
you.
did.
Yes, and I guess I'm open to other people, let's say, who went through the process on that side, saying that it was really important or useful or something. Otherwise, I was thinking like you were, that we do all the interviews then, and then the next week we just come back and have some kind of voting process.
I would say that was the most important part to me, was the
finals.
more in-depth. We did through, I can't remember how many we had. Does anyone remember?
There was 3 finalists.
And we did 45 minutes?
And the first round of interviews were 3 minutes. I believe the second round, we had like 15 minutes.
Oh, 15, okay.
Each, not total, but I might be wrong, but it was a significantly more thorough probing.
Alicia has her hand up. Can't hear you.
Good, because I was laughing at what Maya said. Thought that was funny. Was it thorough probing, Maya? Can you hear me now? Yeah. Excellent. So I will say, in the past, it was the way we did it when the last time was unique. The 2 times before that I've been part of, we actually just voted that day. So we didn't even come back and vote. We just voted that day. And one was the person was chosen the first round. The second time we did it, I think we ended up with 3 rounds before the person was chosen. And I'd heard stories about 15 rounds or something the time before that. So I just want to throw that out. I also just want to put this out. I would like us to not have questions. Don't know if we're gonna have a second round or not, but to just ask the applicants to tell us, well, quickly why they want to be on the board, if there's a way to talk about communities they're involved in or something like that, and just ask them, give them 3 minutes. I can be persuaded certainly the other way, but I just wanted to throw that out for discussion. Question versus 3 minutes, and I'm going towards the 3 minutes at this time. Thanks.
Laura?
So, are you saying not application questions, or you're just talking about the interview at this point?
I'm just talking about the face-to-face time,
Okay.
the interview.
Okay, I'm in agreement with that. I would like to have a discussion at some point about what the questions are. Is that a different?
That'll be next after we figure out this process, yeah.
Yes, okay, and then, as far as changing board calendar, I would, please remind me somebody to add that to the agenda, because this needs to be addressed.
Okay. Maya?
I thank you, Gordon, for pulling me back and reminding me that accessibility is really important. And in that light, I would like to suggest that I appreciate the statement suggestion versus the questioning suggestion, but I would like us to be a little more flexible than 3 minutes, whether it's a language accommodation or other type of accommodation. Some people need more than 3 minutes to communicate the same type of message that somebody else could deliver in 3 minutes. So I feel as though that's an important component of accessibility as well. So just something for us to keep in mind, please.
Okay,
I'm hearing, Carrie, did you have your hand up?
If it's helpful to know, the previous time there was a school board appointment process, there were interviews. It was not a 3-minute statement, it was a 10-minute interview. Really, I think that was effectively about 8 minutes when you counted for transition time between candidates. And that there were 15 candidates interviewed in those initial brief interviews. And then 3 finalists were selected for follow-up. The board felt that there was a need to narrow and have more in-depth interviews following that. One possibility for scheduling would simply be to hold slightly longer interviews with all of the candidates up front. It may depend on how many candidates you
I just wanted to follow up about my initial statement. So to me, the follow-up interviews were more important. So I think because, well, first of all, people who run for the board, this is really, the budget committee is important. Being appointed to the board is really important. And I want a little more time to get to know some of I'm happy to reduce it to finalists, but I just feel like that would be the time to have questions and follow up. So I feel really strongly, if not, I'm gonna ask, if we're only gonna do one round, I'm gonna ask for them all to be longer. But it's just too short. Yeah, I think Laurel, you had your hand up, and then Gordon.
My interest was in having union representation at this. I keep hearing how it's very funny because in getting this position, I had to have all these, it seems like numerous interviews all over everywhere. I was on Zoom, but I'm sure I was in everybody's home. And so I would like to know, if it's not precluded by law, if they can have opinion to this process, because they do usually. It's usually in the real process, when this happens, they usually have opinion and endorsement and such. And so I have a visceral reaction to talking about this as if it's a job interview, because it makes it kind of like this high bar that people have to attain, which I'm sure I wouldn't get this job if it wasn't the public that didn't vote me in. That's right. And there have been wonderful people who haven't gotten it. So I would like to have that conversation. How do we have the other stakeholders who are very relevant to this conversation part of the process? Because it's 2 people for over a year, and I think that's, I don't know, has there been a precedent for that? Because that sounds like quite a bit, a decision. A hefty part of a third almost, I know, I've done math, it's not quite, but it's of our process. Thanks.
Gordon.
I don't know, I hadn't thought of that at all until you raised it, but maybe, I assume that anybody can give us input in between, like the round 1 interviews and the next week when all stakeholders. What I was thinking is that I would rather have I'd rather have the second round of interviews for the finalists and shorter time up front. And I understand what you're saying, but I think if we say 4 minutes, everybody's gonna be 4 minutes. Like, there's just gonna be multiple, because everybody's gonna feel like, this is my one chance, I'm nervous, I wanna tell everybody everything I can about why I would be good on this. And maybe I'm the only one who lives in a world where sometimes there are people who wanna make incredibly long political and historical analyses, but I don't wanna open up the door to that in this process. So I think we have to say, I don't know otherwise, maybe if it's a translation issue, we could make an exception for that. But other than that, I'm not sure, like, I think anything we say you can go up to blah, we should assume that everybody is gonna be doing that.
I think it's also a disability issue as well.
Is it appropriate on when people apply, do you need accommodations for an interview? If we ask that, if someone said, yes, I think people would identify for accommodations and we would obviously provide it. That might be the way to do it.
So then my one other thing is, like, at some point, we need to talk about what's the process for selecting people for the second round of interviews? How do we do that? And obviously, since there's 2 positions, we might want more than 3.
Yeah.
But, so I don't know if you have thoughts on that, but I think that's an
I
important
do
thing to
have
figure out.
thoughts on it.
Then I'm your,
About how to discuss it.
I'm your
so.
straight man.
Yeah. Okay, so right now I'm hearing that we're gonna have, I didn't get the number, let's say 3 minutes, 4 minutes, a statement. People are gonna make a statement, and we're gonna ask people if they need an accommodation to let us know. so that we can allow for more time or an interpreter or translator or whatever is needed? I'm looking around, is that what I'm hearing for this first round? Do you think, I'm looking, you're not comfortable with it, Maya, so tell me.
I'm not comfortable with it, I'm not sure I have a solution, I'm just a little uncomfortable with, I need to think, I don't know how to solve that immediately, but I do worry that that is perpetually asking people to put themselves in a position where they're identifying themselves when there might be a solution that we can put forward that doesn't put people in a category that highlights anything other than the fact that they're a candidate.
I mean, that's why I asked that, but I don't know, so if you come up with something, I think that's great. Laurel?
I feel like a turn just happened and a curve that I didn't, so we're now saying 2 again? And were you asking there not to be any limit on time?
I'm not asking for no limit on time because that's unrealistic. I just think I think 3 minutes for some people is adequate, and for others it's not something that is accessible. So maybe we could make it a range, because I remember during our budget interviews, there were people who were done in a minute and a half. They didn't take up the full 3 minutes. So I remember Martina saying something about, not cutting people off if all of a sudden they filled out the field of words and it was at 48 words and they had 3 more words to finish their sentence. So I just wanna, I wanna honor that this, we talk about how, and we just lost somebody because of accessibility to this job, right? Like in terms of timeliness, but there's so many different other categories that makes doing this work inaccessible. And if we can at the opening gates, make it as accessible as possible, all that we'll be doing is offering us the chance to be more open to as much diversity as we can possibly have. So again, I'm pointing out an issue and I don't necessarily have a solution, and that's why I appreciate all the brilliant minds in here to just ponder it and to think about how we can make it accessible for people who have the need for a little more time. And I'll think in the meantime.
Okay.
So you're saying accessibility as a reason to have a range of time, and we haven't figured out a time, and also, when did it change back to 2, or did it ever change from 2?
Well,
I was like, ooh, good, but I was premature, I guess. Having just been on a lot of interview panels, boundaries are good, and you mentioned earlier the need for people to understand the boundaries and limitations of the work. At 3 minutes, sometimes just sticks in my craw. And so have us coming to a decision about a time period that is fair, but also realizing if we have 40 interviews, this will be horrible and you will not listen to the last 5 well as you listen to the first 5. So kind of creating those boundaries, but having them, that's where I'm at, because I do want those that normally don't feel like they have access to being here to absolutely have access. I do like the idea of there could be a passive way for them to say this and let this be known if there are things, but I want it to be very clearly put that if you would like to share this information, we would like to help you with any accommodations that are necessary. Not that you have to, and not that we're going to. So I think we can do the best of both worlds. Make space for those, but also have limitations on the amount of time we're going to spend. And I thought this was gonna wanna be a fast conversation, I'm so stupid.
I did too,
don't know
Laura.
why. I'm like, there's only 5 of us, we got this. So I would like to have a discussion on the times that we find, and if we were going to have 1 or 2. I think some of this may come out in the wash if we, in 1 week, have 30 applications, and then realize we're only 1 week in. So, that's another part of this discussion. Alicia's been waiting.
Alicia.
Alicia,
You're muted.
can't hear you.
I lowered my hand and didn't unmute. I can only do one or the other. So I appreciate, Laura, what you said, and Maya, what you were saying. I wish there was a way that you didn't have to self-identify, but still have that time. I haven't thought of one and I haven't seen it. But I think your point that we should make sure we have a pathway for that is really important, and that may be the best we can do. You said, somebody said we lost one person because of the timing and how much it takes for this board. We actually lost both of our members because of how long things, just how much work there is with this board, and that's important. And so we will keep that in mind, and we will let people, applicants know. What I am hearing, though, is if we could just kind of move this forward, I'm hearing that we're going to do 3 minutes. Going to throw that out there. 3 minutes. We're going to ask them. We're going to give them a statement about, please tell us why you want to be on the board, and if there's anything else. And I am fine with leadership penning something, and looking at what we've done before. Then we're going to see how many people we have. And on the 20th, I'm fine making the decision about how many people we move forward. I know, Judy, you said you have a process, and that's great. But if we have 30 people, and we have 2 spots, maybe we move 10 forward. We decide that on the 20th when we see who we have, and that we have a little flexibility. But other than that, I'm ready to go on this. I don't know if you need a motion, that people can make friendly amendments to, or if we just can move on with this.
I
Thanks.
think, thank you. Gordon has a comment though, but I don't think we have to vote on this if we reach consensus. If it looks like we're really stuck, I'm gonna suggest we vote on it. If we summarize it and we are all in agreement, I don't believe it's something we have to vote on. People want to, they can.
I think
But-
that's Robert's rules, that we vote on things.
I think that we're just coming up with a process. I don't think this is something we actually have to if we reach a consensus on it. It's an item for information right now on our agenda, so, Gordon.
I feel like we're doing a bad job of modeling for the public how it would take an incredibly long time making what should be a simple logistical decision, like you said. So on the 2 interviews, I was with you. I got convinced because other people said that they thought it important to do 2 interviews. I agree with Alicia. It should be, I would say 3 minutes, unless somebody says I want accommodation, or it seems to me translation should automatically be double, since you have to say something and then somebody has to translate it. But also, my memory of what we do in the regular meetings with public comment is we say it's 3 minutes, but we don't actually cut people off until they go an extra 30 seconds over. Oh, well, anyway, I would be fine doing
finish the
that if we said, okay, we're saying it's 3 minutes, but we're not gonna cut somebody off in the middle of a thought or something like that, but that prevents people from planning for 4 or 5 or longer minutes. And then I agree with Alicia, we have to make the decision on that night, or if we do on 2 nights on the second night.
So that night, we would make the decision for finalists, and then my proposal would be that the 27th, we do the final interviews, unless we can get a sooner date. Laura?
The only caveat I would make is that we say it's 3 minutes, but you can go as long as 5 as needed. Kind of, I think there's a lot you can do in the wording to give people more time if necessary. So if you need to go longer, we say that's possible. So, and is that kind of hit what you're thinking of at all, Maya? That range?
does in the name of compromise. I recognize that we can't keep it open-ended, but Carrie did remind us that last time there were 15 applicants. So we're planning for 50, and that might be unnecessary, in which case, if last time there were 10-minute slots scheduled, and now we've reduced them to 3-minute slots, that's a lot of reduction, and I hate to reduce it based on a fear that there's people who might wanna come in and politically spout, as opposed to prioritizing, making sure that the folks who need the time get the time. So, I mean, it's just, I'm willing to compromise so this doesn't go on forever. But for me, I'm really concerned that this is grounded in some just ableist practices. And I think that if we're modeling, then we need to model. And modeling that is coming up with a different way of doing things. And I know that, for example, when we had time limits put on our statements as board members, we were super resistant to that concept. We wanted the time. And now it feels like we're kind of turning the table and doing that to the prospective candidates. So I also think that there's just as many people out there who don't want to talk for 5-7 minutes. They want to be done.
So what is your proposal? Talk for as long as you want. I just want to
My
understand what you think
proposal
we should do.
is to reconsider, if there was a 10-minute slot last time, why are we pushing it down to 3 all of a sudden when we don't even know why we should anticipate so many more candidates? There were 6 weeks last time and it yielded 15 candidates. We're doing 2 weeks this time and we're anticipating 3 times as many, and I'm not sure that there's I don't know if that makes sense to me. And again, I just, the prioritization for me should be on making this accessible without people self-identifying in the need for accommodations. I think that there's a lot of evidence that suggests that when people self-identify the need for accommodation, that already impacts the processing of that person as a candidate.
We have Gordon, and I have Alicia and Laura.
I just want to say, I'm fine. I don't feel strongly enough about this. I'm fine to do it any way you want or other people want, and I can stay up late, drink coffee and listen to people. Honestly,
I'll bring you
I'm
down.
fine to do it however it works.
Thank you. Alicia, and then Laura.
So Maya, how about this, as I'm listening to you, how about we don't ask anybody to identify as a person with a disability? We just say, we're asking people to limit to 3. If you would like more than 3, please let us know. And then they don't have to identify. And those people like, I don't know, initials GL on the board who like to go a little longer with, couldn't resist it. And those of us that, want to get it done quickly, because 3 minutes is pretty dang scary. And so if you tell me 3, I'm pretty happy. So what if we do that? Everybody gets 3 minutes. If you would like more, please let us know and we will get that scheduled. Something like that. You good with that? I think
So
it means they don't have to identify, but we're giving people that option.
So for scheduling purposes, rather than because you have this need that the world
Right.
you be made aware of.
Right.
Okay.
So please just let us know if you want more than 3 minutes.
Or even
And then, I'm sorry, Judy, what?
go ahead, I thought you were done.
No, I am. I'm sorry. Go.
Laura,
I think that, I thought that was similar to what I was proposing, so, because it would only be going to staff as opposed to everybody knowing. So I think that's very similar to the same thing. I'm trying to figure out if there's a difference that I miss, but it's, okay. So I think the difference is maybe that we're saying you may say if you need more, and that's great. I feel like we're at a place where I vote, I guess, yes. The only thing is, I would like to have,
I have another comment.
proposal was We have the second round on the next day.
Okay, so let me just say, you had suggested that maybe, here's some wording that I would say, listening to everyone's comments. We're asking people to talk for 3 to 5 minutes about why they want to be on the board. I mean, we could say 3 to 5, because, take what you need, but be concise. And we can show, I think it's effective when we have our timer, but not to cut anyone off, but to just show you where you are with your time. So people, like we do for our comments. And then the other piece would be if you need something else or need something more time, to let the staff know, or not even say that. I'm just thinking, I don't want to have someone, because we don't give that option and they don't know they can ask, put them at a disadvantage either. So, but I don't want to broadcast. So I think we could do it all ways, but it would be nice to see how people manage their time by giving them, to your point, a range, but saying we want you to talk about why you want to be on the board. There's one question. Okay? Okay. Now, we're gonna make that night we're gonna make the choice about going to the finalists. And so then the question is, Laurel just made a suggestion of doing the finalist interviews the next day, which is Thursday.
Yeah, well, Alicia actually originally mentioned both days, and I like keeping it tight. And also, we have so many other things happening.
Or maybe Monday, we have a budget committee meeting.
My only, I can call myself.
Gordon.
Thank you. I mean, Laurel, my only concern with that is mostly giving the candidates enough time to get, because like we might not make this decision until close to midnight, which means somebody has to stay up until midnight and then arrange their next day and figure out what they want to say in their 15 minutes or what the questions are, stuff like that. So I feel like if we could, and I don't feel strongly enough about this, if everybody else wants to do it the next day, fine, that's okay, but otherwise it seems like it might be good for them if we have a couple days in between.
Laurel.
Well, I think, again, on the original, when we put everything out, it can say if chosen for final interview, it will be on the, whatever that time is in that time period. So they can be aware and of that well ahead of time to keep that time open if they're chosen. My thing is we have so much with Alma that I don't want to also have this in my head for an entire week of so I'd like to get it done and start onboarding people, which I hope we have an onboarding process, because we didn't. I'd like one.
Okay, so I'm just saying we'll have to vote on seating people. So if we have a second round interview, I'm thinking our vote would be the 27th, because that's a scheduled time. So is there a hurry could we do the interviews, give people a little breath in there? We're gonna be talking about the superintendent timeline, but if we don't bring finalists here till that next week, the first week in May, I think when the finalists come here was gonna be depending on whether we wanted to seat board members before or after. So I think there won't be, we'll have done the first round and people will be making arrangements for the second round. So there is a bit of a lull in there. Laura.
This is process for the Alma and the finalists. There's parts in there, like, are we doing the visits? Does that happen after the finalist interviews? I mean, there's a whole bunch of stuff in there between first and second, which I don't think I have a clear knowledge of what that is and what we're going to participate in. And that's why I'm trying to get this done.
there hasn't been a decision about whether we're making visits or, that's not something they do particularly. It would be something we would really want to do if we wanted to, people were ambiguous at our last meeting, so there's been no decision to do that. I'm looking at Maya, is that your,
That's,
Yeah.
yeah, we were very undecided at that last meeting.
I don't remember the question coming out.
okay, the question coming up, well, this committee, we haven't brought
the
it to the
committee.
group.
Okay, got it.
Yeah, the committee's been talking about it, so, yeah. So I think where we are is, do we want to have last round interviews the night after, and when would we vote? I think I'd like to have a little more space and time, that feels really rushed to me, but if that's what everyone else wants to do, I'll do it. I think Monday or Tuesday would work, but that would be my recommendation, but I would go along with the group. Maya?
So you're saying, wait until Monday the 25th and do the finalist interviews and vote that night?
We could do that, or we could vote we could do a Tuesday and vote that night.
Let's just go with the 27th. Let's not try to squeeze something else in, because my hope is on the 20th, if we start at 4, that we could actually get our interviews done in time to hold a board meeting at 7. I know, I'm living in a fantasy land, Gordon. He's agree. But really 3 minutes, and even if we have 50 people, okay, we aren't gonna have 50. So, and then if we have to go long again on the 27th, we can, but that's kind of what I'm hearing. I'm hearing both, but people are pretty adamant that they want the time, so 27th would be what I would propose.
Gordon?
So again, I'm like Mr. Flexible, and I'll go with the crowd, but I think we should vote on whatever night we do the final interviews. I think we should vote that night, and one reason that would be, I mean, if you turn out to be right, Alicia, and we can do all the interviews and make our decision about who the finalists are, and then still have time to do other business, that would be good. I'd be a little surprised. And so then one reason to do it before the 27th is that then they could also participate in whatever the regular business is that we then schedule for the 27th if we're moving from the 20th. But again, whatever everybody wants to do, I'm okay with.
So when are you proposing to do the finalist interviews?
So I was saying we could do them on Monday the 25th and vote that night on who we're appointing, have them sworn in, and then if our next regular meeting is moved to the 27th, then they're already participating in that meeting.
Others on that?
Mondays are hard, and also, when are these budget committee meetings? They seem to happen all the time.
Monday
My
the
fault.
25th is a budget.
Yeah.
committee.
Yeah. Is that what you're getting? You're like, wait a minute.
So, be careful of what you ask for, you may just get it.
The only thing I'd add, I've done a lot of interviewing for people, and it's hard for me to do an interview and not really have time to reflect. So if I have to do an interview and then immediately vote, it is hard. So I'd like to have a little space between when I interview and when I make a decision, so I can really think it through and read my notes and give it some thought.
For the second round also?
Really?
For the second, especially for the second round.
So you don't wanna do it like last time?
Is that what, did we vote right away? Yeah, I didn't like that,
I didn't even
actually.
have time to think.
Mm-hmm, yeah.
I need to go with that.
Please, share.
Delights me. Okay,
Laurel?
I love I'm a Quaker, consensus is part of our life, it also takes a ton of time. The good thing is when you get to it, it usually lasts for a long time. I believe that it's not abnormal to make decisions on the same day, because we have been having this process. I would, so I feel like we've gone on another curve where I thought we were making the decision that we were going to have final interviews and make decisions on that night, and I thought that was part of what Alicia said and what Gordon said, and I thought what Maya had said. And I guess I'm confused, having not been part of this process, like, I guess everybody else. And I hear what you're saying, that's something that you prefer. I would like to hear if that is equally important to everyone, and so we can come to some kind of choice around this. For myself, it's really normal to have an interview panel, to score it, and to get that information back. I don't get several days to reflect on things at the county, so.
Well, I think
having recently asked for more time to process information and not gotten it, I feel as though erring on the side of acknowledging that someone is asking for time versus rushing through it is really important. If we have a budget committee meeting scheduled for Monday night, I think it would be reasonable to do those interviews on Monday night before our budget committee, since we already have that time allotted, or after the budget committee, since that's from 6 to 7:30. And then following it up on that Wednesday, so giving it a 48-hour turnaround, which would allow us to go back and look at the written applications as well. Although we can do that ahead of time, but I can recognize that this is a really important decision, and while it could be done quickly, I don't know, I've heard people indicate that they have made decisions in the past that happen quickly and then have regrets, and I don't think this is something that we should decide and then feel regretful.
Does anyone else have a comment on the timeline? You're flexible, Gordon says.
I'm just laughing at Maya. Yes, but I also feel like you do, like if any of us says, oh, I feel like I need more time to consider, fine, then I would support that. I just want to make sure that it's done by the 27th, and actually I personally would support even having an extra meeting so that they could participate in the 27th, but it's not, like the world's not going to stand or fall on that.
Okay, so then, should we go with Alicia's proposal? I'm okay to do it
Which is
early.
what?
What is what?
Doing the interviews on Monday, before and or after, hopefully before or after, or split them between the budget committee, and then voting on the 27th. Laurel?
I will do it after budget, because I'm already taking out of work time to get here for the interviews on the Wednesday, so I will do it after that.
Okay. The other time we could do it is Tuesday, since we're gonna vote on Wednesday. I just didn't ask for days. We could do the finalist interviews on Tuesday. That's Monday, Tuesday,
I would
Wednesday.
prefer to not add a whole other meeting day, but Tuesday would allow us to not have anything that day,
Okay,
I
personally.
concur.
great. All right, that'll be the plan then.
So if the board knows the number of finalists that you plan to move forward to the finalist round, then we can plan for the time slots and working around the budget committee.
On the 25th.
If that can be determined in advance. And then in the work session on the 20th, when the board has heard from each of the candidates with their statement about what they want to serve on the board, at the end of that work session, the board can briefly ballot to share your top choices to move forward to finalists, so that we have a decision at that time about which one, staff will process the ballots
And so that would go on the agenda for the regular meeting, correct? That's gotta be.
It certainly could. You could either do it at the end of the work session, or you could have it as an item in the regular meeting.
Can we vote on that?
You're not making a final decision. You're moving forward. People can
Okay.
finalists, but you could do it in the regular meeting as well, and have that be vote to approve moving forward those individuals as finalists.
Laura?
It's concerning to like have a set amount of people moving forward, because many times then you're like, well, we have to pick one more person. So is it just up to a certain amount? Or does it need to be like 5? Or can it be just up to 5 chosen to move forward?
The sense of the scope would help. There's a big difference between 4 and 10 in terms of figuring
yeah.
out the scheduling. So that decision also could be made on the night, but having a sense of where you're targeting towards, and then making a decision about just where to draw the line. That could happen on that night. If it is a larger number and the board is aiming to have longer interviews, to have more substantive conversation with each of the candidates, and you're going to have 8 to 10 candidates as finalists, then that would be a late night after the budget committee meeting.
Okay. So we aren't gonna set a set number. We wanna reduce it, there's gonna be a range that we want for finalists, no more than 5, more like 3 if we can, 3 or 4, but no more than 5. Does that seem reasonable?
For finalists.
I know. I guess I don't know, I'm not sure we have to stick to 5 for 2 positions, but I also, unless I missed this, what feels a little more important to me is how we're gonna choose whether it's 5 or 10 or something. What is the process to do that?
I think we vote.
Well, I know, but so like we could say, like anybody who receives, like if we say, okay, who does everybody want to see as a finalist? And we say anybody who at least 3 members of the board want to see as a finalist is on, or maybe we say 2. I don't, the thing that you raised that we may have done before about everybody says 2 names, I feel like I wouldn't choose to do it that way, but so I'm just trying to figure it out, because voting, it's not clear what voting means.
How do we whittle it down to finalists? Got it. Good question.
I do think you need to have 4 votes in order to move somebody forward, one way or another, for a finalist.
Move somebody
Because
forward
effectively, if you're screening them out, you're essentially unchoosing them, you're choosing that it will not be them. So I think to move a candidate forward, unless you all have some other mechanism, like, okay, you can each move 2 forward.
Gordon?
I think that, like with what we do with the agenda, when we say, as long as 3 people want something to be on the agenda, then it's on the agenda, right? That's not a quorum decision. It's less than a quorum, it's less than a majority. But, so I guess to me, and I don't actually remember what we did last time. I didn't think that, to say who are the people we want to see again, I didn't think that we required 4 votes. And it seems to me like we should be able to, there should be a way to do that in a similar way to what we do with the agenda.
Well, that's, I guess, fundamentally changing the decision. And one piece is that you have working agreements that say you can move something forward on as an agenda item if you've got 3. So if for a future, as an item for, for consideration for scheduling, that's a totally different thing than making a decision to not move someone forward or to move someone forward. That is actually a decision of the board, and even if it's an interim decision in terms of who do we want to interview as a finalist, you still have to have 4 votes for that.
How is it more of a decision than deciding we want to put something on the agenda?
You have to have 4 to put something on the agenda.
No, just 3.
I thought you were talking about when you're talking at the end of a board meeting.
That is what I
Okay,
mean.
well, I believe it's because you have board working agreements to that effect.
It's
But-
Robert's rules.
But then those must not violate the law, right? If we have those working agreements, I mean, we can make an agreement here. I just don't wanna narrow, like, I feel like if there are people who, a significant number of people wanna see, but less than 4, I don't wanna, I would like to be able to let people interview those people.
Laurel,
The way I see this, the way it's proposed, what happens, is that we could be stuck never getting there for quite a while, because having 4 for every person to move forward, it may not happen. So, when we have this amount of people, so it doesn't make sense as far as just how voting works. We're not making final decisions here, we're moving people forward in a process, so I think I would like, as far as I understand Robert's rules, the reason that it's not a majority is because Robert's rules is made in such a way that you cannot reduce the voice of anybody. And so when somebody proposes something, and you don't need a majority to allow that voice to bring something to the board. That is a Robert's rules, not a board working agreement. The other part of this is that I would like us to look at, and perhaps making a decision tonight in a vote, maybe a working agreement on how we will do this and not have to be 4. Because if it's not a final decision for the 2 new board members, then this process will be a quagmire of having to have 4 out of 5 to move people forward. It'll be going back and back and back, and there's just no reason for that when we could have a majority vote on this.
Christine, you have some, and then Alicia's in the queue.
Thank you. I'd just like to clarify, you wouldn't have to vote necessarily individually on each by a majority. Ultimately, you have to vote on a slate of finalists to move forward. Otherwise, you would be in violation of state law, which requires 4, and so that's the issue. You can't change state law in that affirmative vote of a majority of members.
Let's hear Alicia, and then, yeah, go ahead.
Thanks. And by the way, when we say 3 of us at the end of the meeting, it's to pass it on to leadership and they decide whether to put it on the agenda or not. So really, it's a little different. But back to this, we're going to have to compromise on this, folks. We got to get 4 votes at the end, and there are 5 of us. So let's think about the best way to do that. I would not be okay with majority moves forward. You get 3 votes and you move forward, and if you only get 2, you don't. But I also know 4 would be very hard, particularly just to move people forward. So would it be possible that we each got to put 2 people forward? And if there was people doubled up, we could figure out a way. And there's 5 of us and we do 4 or 2 each, that would be 10. We would be moving 10 people forward, which, maybe if something like that, because we've got to figure something out. Otherwise, we are going to be there for 4, and I don't know who said it's a quagmire, but it would be a long night. So just a thought, and I don't know, Christine, if that's a possibility.
I think that probably is. Let me think about that a moment.
I had a suggestion.
Go ahead. I'll talk after
Did you have
you.
a suggestion too?
I'd like to hear yours first
Okay.
before I.
What if, go ahead.
It is a possibility, because if there's a vote by this body that, to the effect that that's how you are gonna make your decision, that each of you will have 2 to move forward, that would be something that you could do, I believe.
So that would be one option. I think, I mean, another way to maybe, if we did need 4 votes, I was thinking in that way, that we would each vote for, let's say we decide we don't wanna move more than 6 people forward or something, I'm just gonna say we to, you know, to finalists or 5. We each get 4, you know, give 1 vote for your top 4 or your top 5 and see who gets 4 votes first time around. They go. And then we do it again. You go for your next, that one's off the list. So I think we could conceivably get finalists that got 4 votes that way.
So just say it again.
So we do, for the first round, everyone got, let's say, 4 votes. And you vote for your top 4. It's not like you're 1, 2, you know, you don't rank order them. And so then we look at it, and some of those, someone might get 4 votes, then that person gets definitely moved to the finalists. Then we do it again. You get 4 more votes until you get to have X number of finalists that got 4 votes. Because you keep adding your votes. You can stay with the same ones. One you voted for might have moved forward. I think we would get to finalists that got 4 votes if we kept moving through that in rounds. It's another thought, takes some time. Carrie had something to add, and then my.
Just as you're discussing possibilities for how to move this forward, again, if you need to have a majority, a quorum of the board deciding on who to move forward, that doesn't necessarily have to be a quorum of the board in that first information gathering. You could gather that information and then vote on a slate. For example, polling all board members, ballot and select their top 3 or 4 candidates, and then you look at the list and see how many votes each person got, and somebody makes a motion to move forward the top 6 candidates or the top 4 candidates, or et cetera. And if you have a majority of 4 board members to move that slate forward, then there you are, and it wouldn't require an initial selection of those top people by 4 initial board members.
Mike, good waiting, Gordon, and then Mike.
First of all, I found it helpful what you said the last time you spoke, because my understanding was similar to yours. Like, if we could say, this is the process we're going to use, and then we use that process, and then we have a vote of 4 people to say, having used that process, these are the people we're moving forward, and that process could be whatever makes sense to us. I actually thought that your proposal, once I understood it after 2 explanations, was good. I mean, maybe there's other ways of doing it. I don't like the thing of, okay, everybody puts forth 2 names, because I feel like it ends up with too much calculation or gamesmanship or trying to figure things out. So I would be, I don't know, to me, I feel like what you proposed would be okay, because then we're saying, right, we'll try to get 4 votes for however many people we get 4 votes for as votes, right?
Is there a problem with that one? Was that different? I didn't quite understand was that just going the next step?
I was suggesting an alternative, and again, you can select your mechanism for moving forward. You may not have any people who are selected by 4 board members, at least initially, but perhaps if you narrowed it or kept adding more votes, you would get there.
Mike?
My initial reaction to Alicia's is I love that idea. I feel like Alicia's idea is it puts all 5 of us on the same playing field. I do appreciate what you're saying about the possibility of I don't remember what word you used, gamesmanship. But I think it also allows for 10 to be whittled down if there's any repeats. And it feels, I also really appreciate yours. I just see that holding the potential for taking a lot of time and a lot of revotes over and over and over. So I was just gonna share that I felt like Alicia's suggestion was just clean and done.
Can you just say again how you understand it working?
Yeah, each of us says, these are the 2 names that I wanna bring into the next round. And I say Polly and James, and you happen to say Polly and James, or Judy happens to say Polly and James. Suddenly there's not 10 people anymore, now there's the potential for fewer. Does that make sense? And the risk is, and it's not a risk, it's actually the beauty is, what if all 5 of us say Polly and James, and suddenly
We wouldn't have to do second.
Polly and James are our new board candidate, our new board members, right? The only consideration there is that we could end up with 10, which feels on the bigger side. But I anticipate that there would probably be some overlap, that's, gambling.
Laurel.
I actually don't like that idea. I find it takes away from the process that we have as a board of not, has, the whole time I've been here is the majority moves things forward. And so while I prefer it not only to be the set amount of the quorum, but since that is there, I think it's very similar that what Judy said, that if 4 people get moved forward, we will be seeing, it'll be similar but done in a way that feels more in the spirit of how it's supposed to happen. In this way, that's proposed. What I hear is that we're kind of ignoring the fact that there is usually a majority rule and we're letting everybody move people forward, which is, I think, not the process that we've used. That's not what I've had to deal with since I've been here. So I would absolutely want to move forward who the majority of people, since that's what we have to do, that's what I'd like to do. I do find both of these very similar, so I'm not set on either one. But I do like the fact that my voice will be involved in the decision making if we move forward.
Can I just ask Carrie to clarify hers one more time, because I didn't get the subtlety, and I realized this kind of voting, like I learned a lot about rank order voting, and sometimes there's things there I don't really get. It seems logical, so please.
Right, so just one option to consider, and I'm sorry, I'll try to be more clear, I may not have been previously, would be simply to poll the board, have the board complete a ballot, each board member selects their top 3 or top 4, choose your number, each board member chooses their top 4 candidates. We tally that information, we share that information. Polly got 4 votes, James got 3, Susan got 0, and Pedro got 4. Then the board moves forward, if somebody will make a motion from that to propose that you move forward a slate of this number of candidates. If need be, you could have an additional ballot, again, adding a candidate per board member, until you have a slate of candidates who are of interest to multiple board members. They're coming out ahead of other candidates, but it doesn't lock it into a certain number until you're in the moment there and looking at that potential slate. Nor does it require that that there be an initial vote of 4 board members in order to place somebody on the slate, but there would still be a requirement that 4 board members would need to say, yes, this is the slate of finalists, we're going to move forward, that is fair.
Is it fair
I
to
think
say,
okay.
I just want to clarify.
Okay, sure.
Is it fair to say it's basically what you said, but in one step?
Yeah, I think that's why I heard it too. Yeah. Gordon.
I guess I heard it a little differently, and I'm still and I understand like the thing that you said, and maybe that's what Alicia's saying too, but in my experience, like I remember when we were trying to pick board goals, and we did something like, all right, everybody gets 3 green dots, or have a certain number of green dots, right? And then everybody's thinking, okay, I want more than 3, and if I think somebody's gonna put a green dot, then I'm not gonna waste my green dot. Like it gets this weird kind of calculatingness, and I think that the way that you were talking about is also more like us making a decision as a group and more majority, but my one idea is to say, if we say we want to have 5 finalists or 6 finalists, but I think I'd be okay with 5, then we say we're going to have that many, right? Which I feel like takes some of the pressure off. You're not thinking, oh my God, if there's 4, maybe there's only going to be 2 people who get 4 votes. Like, so we know, okay, I'm just voting to move somebody to interview, and it's not so calculating or something. We say we're definitely going to have final interviews with X number of people. and then we could do yours, and then we'd say, okay, all the people we have, at least 4 people said they wanna have an interview with, as opposed to this, oh, I said 2, but I knew that you were gonna vote for so-and-so, you know.
So we could do it the way I suggested it, sounds like Gordon, and then maybe let's agree to go 2 or 3 rounds, and if it looks like it's gonna go forever, just say, okay, let's look at where we are with our votes and move them forward, the hybrid. Does that, so we,
That's totally fine. See, as a person who has fallen on the majority side often on this board, I was looking to protect the minority voice, I'm saying it backwards. And I would have loved to have been like, this is a board goal, whether everybody agrees or not, and that's just my little thing. And I, it's all calculating, I mean, no matter how we do it, it's calculating, there's no moving the calculations involved. However, I mean, it's about voting.
Laura,
Is this similar to the budget vote that we did? Cause I remember thinking at the time, this is different and okay.
It's different from the budget committee process in that the board's practice for the budget committee appointments in the past has been to hear from budget committee members and then come together as a board and ballot to select budget committee members. You're not looking for finalists to narrow to a slate of finalists. You are looking to get to a majority decision on candidates. So the board has balloted with each board member selecting their preferred candidates, and then when a candidate has a majority of votes, when a candidate has at least 4 votes, they're moved forward, and then, yes, the board finally votes on a slate. But that has been, in the past, the board coming to a majority of board members selecting that candidate to place them on the slate. But that's for the final decision, not for finalists.
And, sorry, can I ask one more clarification question? If you were saying we might do your thing and then fall back as your thing, I just wanna make sure that, sorry, I wanna make sure I understand. Your thing is we would all say, let's say if we say we wanted to have 5 or 6 interviews, then we'd all make a list of the 5 or 6 people we wanna see, and we'd see who has the most votes, and then make a decision, like walk me through it.
Yes, so that was the alternative that I was initially talking about, and of course, it's the board's decision about how to go forward, but under that mechanism, the board would, similar to with the budget committee, each board member would have a ballot, each board member would decide 3 candidates, 4 candidates, who are your top 4 candidates. Then that information is gathered, so that's 20 votes total, 5 board members, 20 votes, that's tallied up, information is shared back to the board about who voted what and how many votes were tallied for each candidate, or how many interests were expressed in each candidate. And then look at that, there may be some with support from 4 board members to move forward, there may be some with support from 3, support from 2, and that would allow a proposal to, there's 6 people who got either 4 or 3 votes, or 6 people who got either 4 or 5, 4 or 3 or 2 votes. I propose we move those forward as the candidates, and then the board can discuss and decide. Now, that may not be the method that you want to go with, but that is one that could potentially avoid getting bogged down in needing to get to 4 votes in order to select the individual to start.
Thanks. So I just say for me on that one, if we do that as a backup, I would just wanna say, let's say how many people do we wanna interview, and then we each vote that number, right? So if we say we wanna interview 5 people, so we vote for 5 people, just to take, because I think that takes out an one of the
Yeah.
element of calculating this, and then we do it that way.
I think that would make me feel more comfortable too. So Alicia,
I just point out that is my proposal, only you've added 5 instead of 2, just to be clear. And then you put your slate together, but you need 4 votes to move that slate forward, correct? It's not, because, just really want to be clear, because I think it can be confusing, because usually we do majority, but in this case, we need 4, correct? All right, thanks.
so are we leaning towards Carrie's proposal?
I'm fine with hers or yours.
Okay, then I'd say we wanna just set a number though that we want not to exceed. 6, not to exceed
6 is
5,
good.
6 is my favorite number.
Okay, 6.
not to exceed, we don't have to move 6 forward.
You know, I worked with an attorney that would always say, how'd you come up with that number? So I have an answer. Last time when we had 1 opening, we moved 3 forward. This time we have 2 openings, we're moving 6 forward.
Okay.
Okay, I think we have a process. We're going with Carrie's process, not to exceed 6 people moving forward. Right?
Yes, and also just recognizing that there can be slight complications in a voting process, such as you have 2 clear front runners or no clear front runners, and then a tie of 10 people. In which case the board would need, could then have,
Take the
another
2
round.
that are tied and go another round. Okay, good.
So it's just that flexibility to have additional rounds if needed.
I need a break.
Okay, let me just ask, we're asking to take a 5-minute break. And Alicia, I know you have a time commitment, right? Do you need to leave us?
Well, I have 3 nights with my son, and this is one of them. And I haven't seen him in a long time. So I did want to leave, but I'm also don't want to, I want to vote on the vice chair and hear the items. So I may have to beg out. All that to say, I'll stay as long as I can, Judy, but if we could move things along, it'd be great.
Okay, great. Let's take a break and we could move the item up on the agenda. Is that what you were gonna suggest, Gordon? Is there anyone opposed to that? Anyone? I see Maya's agreeing, and Alicia, Laurel, are you okay with that? Cause if you are, we won't.
I'm fine with that, I'm just wondering, we're making consensus choices and then we're going to be missing a board member, so I'm concerned about that. Is Alicia okay with?
If I leave, I have to be. So I will stay as long as I can. Thanks. Thanks, Laurel.
Thanks. Okay, welcome back, everyone.
Yeah.
I would just start off by Carrie, you offered to summarize where we are for us, just so we're all clear. And then we're gonna go on to the vice chair.
Yes, thank you. So after much discussion, to be certain that we are all on the same page, where I believe that the board wants to move forward is that they'll hold the first interviews on April 20th. That's the Wednesday work session prior to the regular meeting. You could start as early as 4 p.m. and that would be a 3 to 5 minute statement from each candidate about why they want to serve on the board. That night, in the regular meeting, the board will ballot to select finalists. Through the process you discussed that if you're going to have up to 6 finalists, 5 or 6 finalists, each board member will ballot for 6 finalists, tally the votes, and then move to move forward a slate of candidates if there's a clear division point, and if not, you can have additional rounds to develop a clear division point. Those finalists would be scheduled for interviews, longer interviews, was it 15 minutes? If that works for the number of candidates, following the budget committee meeting on Monday, April 25th. Tuesday night would be a non-board meeting night, and then Wednesday, April 27th would be when we would vote on the final selection. Those individuals, if they're in the audience, once the board selects the 2 candidates and votes to appoint them, they will be sworn in immediately. And there's no waiting till the next day. If they are present, they can be sworn in and begin their duties. The board also discussed potential accommodations. Currently as drafted, we were planning to share information about who to contact if to request any accommodations. We certainly can also simply add a question to the form saying, please, similar to what we do for public comment, please contact me about Spanish interpretation, about sign language interpretation, or about any other needed accommodations. But if the board does not want to do that, we won't. Does that roundup sound good? And do you want to ask about accommodations, so that it is clear that that is a possibility, that would not be included in those, posted publicly?
Laurel?
I had two things. One is, yes, to asking about accommodations. I think it can equally be as offensive not to make space for that. The other thing is, did it leave my brain? Oh, if I don't have 6 people, do I have to vote for 6 people? I mean, that seems,
We've had that, go ahead, Gordon.
I think you can always leave places blank, right? It's saying that our intention is, or our goal is to have 6 people so that we don't feel like
not more.
we're competing for only 2 slots or something, but you can always vote, say if there's only 3 people you wanna see, you'll just vote for those 3 people and leave the rest blank.
And one vote, one person.
Yeah, you can't vote for one person twice.
And this
We
is
would-
not ranked voting, correct? This is just equal votes.
Each person has to get, so somebody needs to get 4 votes to move forward.
Right, but I'm not listing them my first to sixth priority. Okay. Can
I think it'll already be a list, right?
Yeah, you'll just put a mark by each one, you don't have to rank them. Yeah, go ahead.
Can I just ask that if we are gonna do the route of identify your need ahead of time, that we are prepared ahead of time so that that just moves slowly and there's not the need to broadcast people's different needs.
Absolutely.
That would feel like a compromise to me.
Oh, does everybody understand that? I don't know if I completely did. I wanna make sure I do.
Well, if we have someone who needs Spanish language interpretation, that just gets taken care of and we're not like, everybody be patient with us while we set up the interpreter, and it's just anticipated and part of the flow, and it's just smooth and we're ready to have that be normalized.
And I think Carrie said that we'll have American Sign Language interpreter and Spanish interpreter available, so no one has to ask for it, just they know that we'll have them there. Because
Even better.
That is wonderful, and I feel like,
they might need more time.
and I think that it's also it could be the board chair's purview to recognize that someone is demonstrating a need for more time and doesn't need to be cut off by the terrifying gong.
Yes, I agree. And these will be, well, we haven't decided, are they in person?
Yes.
Yeah, good, then it's not, yes, that's a little bit easier too than cutting someone off, for sure.
And to answer your question about would there be a list, yes, well, when the board is meeting in person, this is a little easier to do, you can just make a physical ballot. You can check off up to 6 people on that can tally. And then share it back and somebody would move a slate of candidates, we have a higher number of votes.
Gordon?
This is a tiny thing, but I would like everybody to come in person, but if there's somebody who for some reason has to be by Zoom because they have a house or something, I assume we would want that to
Yeah,
happen.
accommodate,
Right,
yeah.
accommodate.
Or if they have COVID.
Yeah.
Please stay.
So we also share the application questions that have been used previously to gather some information from people in writing, and we're planning to open that application unless there's any reason to change any of those.
Well, I think, Laura, we wanted to talk about, so let me do the agenda item, because that might be a conversation, is that okay? Then we'll come back to that, what we're gonna put out in the application. Okay. So I'm just gonna move us to the item for action. We have a vacancy as the vice chair for the rest of this year, which goes through June 30th, 2022. And would like to have some nominations.
Alicia's hands up.
Yeah, Alicia, go ahead.
I'd like to nominate Maya for the vice chair for the rest of this year.
A second.
Do you have a second? Good. Okay, so Alicia nominates Maya. Maya, will you accept that nomination?
Thank you for asking. I do accept it, thank you.
Then Alicia nominates and Laurel seconds. Any discussion? Okay, then let's vote. We do need 4 people to vote, so all those in favor, raise your hand. I think we have 5 votes. We have 5 votes, so that passes unanimously. Thank you, Maya. Looking forward to working with you.
Likewise. And
So-
thank you for trusting me, everyone.
There's a second item for action then related to that, now that we have a name. We need to authorize the vice chair to sign for the district during the remainder of the 2021-22 fiscal year. And I think everyone got to read that, it was in the packet. It's if I can't sign, she has the authority to sign. And we can fill in her name. So do I have a motion for that?
I
Wait.
move that we authorize the new vice chair to sign in the event that you can't.
Thank you. And second? Great. Gordon moves and Laurel seconds. Any discussion? All those in favor, raise your hand. All right, again, this passes five yes votes, so congratulations. You got the purse strings here. Okay. Now let's go back to the conversation about questions. So I'm going to ask Laurel to talk first.
Okay, let me get them scrolled up. Oh, I think I'm on the wrong thing because it's not in the packet. Yeah, it's separate, right? It's in the, over here?
Yeah.
I thought you were just smart, I did it.
Nope.
I was like, the questions as they stand, I believe, don't follow some of the, what we talked about when we were talking about, questions we were talking about questions before for, I don't know if I can talk about it, was that?
In executive session.
Yeah,
Okay.
so, but I can make my point that there's no question about equity on here. There's none, which is just is very concerning that there wasn't previously. And I said, in asking someone to describe their experience or training that prepares them, I think we can ask people how they're prepared for this position, but I think it's a leading question to say, we want you to have this experience and training, and I think it removes people from the equation that might apply. And so I'd love for us to look at all of these with that lens to say, whose voice may end up removed from this if we present the questions in the way we have. Most of them are fine. I do definitely want to add an equity question.
Right, which one specifically, can you just point me to the one that, oh, here, I see, the third one from the bottom, please give a brief, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Do you want to eliminate that one, or do you want to rephrase it?
I would say we can eliminate it, but we can say what prepares you maybe said somewhere else in here. I believe the one under it also says, you know, a mom of 5, hello, that's me, doesn't have a lot of time to volunteer. And so asking that is actively telling people as they're applying, don't bother. It may not seem like that to a lot of middle class norms, but it absolutely does.
Gordon.
So to me, the first 4 of these are good. I would also support adding a question about equity, and I would probably just get rid of the last 3. I certainly would get rid of the last one, because I think that's a little weird. And if people want to tell us in their 3 to 5 minutes when they're telling us whatever they want to tell us, if they want to talk about their volunteer activity or something else, then they can put that in there. It's not like there won't be room for people to talk about that if that's what they want to talk about, but that's what I would do.
So I'm gonna ask while we're sitting here, if you have any suggestion, I see Alicia's hand up, And I see Maya's light on, and let's come up with it. If you have a suggestion for a question about equity, that would be great. So I don't know who was first.
Alicia can go first.
Go ahead, Alicia.
Thanks. Hey, I just want to be clear that, because you guys weren't all part of this, but last time we made a decision not to ask the equity question in the application, but we did ask it during the interview. So there was a question during the interview. And so if you're looking for something, I don't know that it was a great question. I don't know that they ever get a great question on equity, because it's just so complex. You know, we want to go deeper than the question. But we might want to look there and
Yeah,
see
I
if
think
we had a good one, if we had a
just
good one for the interview.
relevant to what Alicia said, the conversation, that might not be the right conversation, was let's see if that's something that came up from someone on their own, is something that they thought was of high interest, and then follow up. But it can, I'm okay either way. Go ahead, Maya.
Just to back up what Gordon said, I fully support just eliminating the last 3 questions. I also think that the first 4 lend themselves to someone independently bringing forward the question of equity, which now we're discussing this here so people can go back and listen and they can know that we're interested in that. But it doesn't, like when we were doing the questions for the search committees, when we were doing the request for the proposals, Alicia pointed out that sometimes you don't wanna ask questions that guide people towards the answer that you obviously want. And I feel like any of those first 4 questions, if that's something that matters to those people, I know if I were answering one of those first 4 questions, I'd probably answer it in all 4 of those personally. Touch on it anyway, so, I think we offer them the opportunity in an open-ended way to identify what they think is important, and you know, then it's up to us to have that response or reaction to what they're identifying. So I'm not sure how we could ask that question without kind of making it really clear what our hope is for their answer, unless it's worded in an open-ended way about equity, but I'm open to seeing how that could happen. And I don't know if maybe we wanna think about a replacement question for those last 3 that's tell us something, you know, or you miss, what else is missing, or what else would you like to let us know?
I wrote one that might work,
Awesome.
but go ahead, Gordon.
So a tiny thing is on the 4th one, we said, what do you think are the 2 most important issues? I would just like to put in like, other than the superintendent search, so we don't have like everybody saying, here's an obvious thing, right? And then on the equity issue, I would actually like to have a question, because I think, you know, not having a question, okay, is it central enough or important enough for people to bring it up? But people have all different kinds of things to say about equity, and like, I think at the U of O, I think we at this point couldn't do a search or a department evaluation with a question that's basically like, if you were on the board, how would you see yourself contributing to the goals of equity, right? And then people can go wherever they go with that. And I would actually be interested to hear what people have to say. So some question like that, I think would be good.
That's open-ended, that's, yeah. What do you think about that question? Did you have one?
Well, I'm looking some up. I found of course it says it wants me to just subscribe now. I like the idea of, I hear what you guys are saying, but I also think it's something I've heard always, and what it just kind of, like, it'll come up if it comes up, and then it doesn't come up, and then we still have to make decision out of these people. I like, how might some groups of students be experiencing school climate differently than others? What academic achievement gaps might exist between groups of students? Something that kind of brings in, we're here for students, right? What are some things that I love to know that they're paying attention, as opposed, I can get this out, I swear. Being on the board sometimes is like, I wanna be on a board. Being on the school board is really, how can I support students educators, staff, and hopefully help make our district stronger and more successful. And so having a question like that brings the students into it and talks about equity, how might some students not be seen the same at school, you know? I don't want to just be the one to, I'm sorry I didn't look this up ahead of time, because I'm like, God, I could have done so much research. But I think we can find something, because I know that they hear when they have to hire somebody, have to have an equity question. I have to have an equity question at Lane County. You probably have to at U of O, like you just said. So it's a real necessity, because while we hope it's there, many times it just doesn't show up, and we can't just live on hope. So what group of students may be over or underrepresented in our disciplinary and behavioral data, you know, things like that. Maybe less tight as that, but something that says, are you aware that there are things going on that we should be looking at? And it has to do with equity. And it doesn't have to say, do you know what equity is? Because I've just done interviews where we had an open-ended equity question thinking it's going to be, and guess what? A lot of people mention fiscal equity, which is like, oh no. The only one I give a pass to is the one that's refugee, because obviously they may not know our idioms yet. So.
Okay, are you good with a question like that, or?
I've heard several different ones.
Do you want to hear them all again?
Yeah, or if you have one that you particularly like out of that group, yeah.
Some of these are really like, it's interesting because it says there's school board questions, and they're like, how ready and equipped do teachers and staff feel to support all learners? I don't think there's any way for anybody to answer that well.
Yeah.
I guess I was saying these in the hope that we could talk a little bit about, Alicia's hand's up, so I'm hoping she has an idea, about how we can talk, I know this is not just me doing this, so talk about how we would do this, but have an equity question, and I don't want it just the pad. Great. What's the equity?
Noodle on that, we have Maya and then Alicia.
I would love, Gordon, if you have a chance to restate yours, because it felt open but not just like so broad. I worry that if we get too specific and we ask them to point to examples of inequity, we're gonna get a whole lot of graduation rates, and everyone's gonna give these very easy to Google answers, and whereas the way that you worded it,
What did you bring?
I would like to hear it
I
again.
didn't hear a question, I'm sorry.
So my idea was to say, like, if you were on the board member, how would you see yourself contributing towards the goals of equity? And maybe we could even add on to that some like kind of related, like, you know, such as ensuring that all students have I don't want to put words in their mouth, but like, you know, such as addressing achievement gaps or differential access to enrichment programs, or I don't know, like if we could, so, and maybe there's some way to leave it open-ended, but also to like name as examples some of the things that you were getting at.
I like it, I just would, instead of just saying equity for the problems I just had, maybe the DEI.
Carrie, I know you're writing this down, can you read it back to us, because you're gonna have to get the application out.
Yes, indeed, and what I just wrote down, and this could change, if you were on the board, how would you see yourself contributing to the goals of equity, access, and inclusion? That could be equity, diversity, and inclusion. It's just a choice, or all of the.
Equity, access, and inclusion, or diversity, equity, inclusion? Any preference?
Alicia's had her hand up for a long time.
Oh, yeah.
Maybe we should hear.
Alicia, sorry.
Actually, you guys already did a lot of it. Maya did. I was going to ask Gordon to repeat what he put out, because I think that's really important. What Maya and I were talking about was I'm not giving, as you guys talked about, the answer, hey, we're really into teams. What do you think of teamwork? We don't want to do that, right? So I liked your open-ended, Gordon. Maybe if you want to capture some of what um, Laura was saying, is you could put at 4J, we're dealing with this, and this. How do you see yourself? Then you can direct people more to answer the question as it relates to a school board member. I personally would just leave it open-ended because I think, I'm curious who they are who they are and what they bring to this position. Thanks.
I can wait. It's okay. I was just gonna say, I even think something, I hear what you're saying, but I do think that even asking, what does equity mean to you is like a really foundational question, and if they blow it, they blow it. But so many people are really confused about and conflate equity and equality, and to me, that would be really important to know if somebody even has a foundational understanding of what equity is and what their vision of how equity fits into an education system looks like. But
I like that, the, but I'm also thinking of the ableism, and I'm not saying that right, but the fact that, I was just at interviews where people didn't, while they obviously understood, if they took a moment, what it meant, which is why I like it in the written part as well, somebody who had English as a second language, and there was somebody I interviewed today, we use it as an idiom. It's not just known everywhere what this is. So I wish it was, but what's the perfect, I don't want to hand it like Alicia and Maya say, I don't want to hand you the answer. I would like to know what you understand, but I also want to make sure I'm giving you the information to have that understanding, which is kind of, I found out the hard way that it looked like a simple question and it was really hard for several people.
Go ahead, Gordon.
I'm just trying to like stumble towards something that might work. Like if we said like, how would you contribute to the goals of diversity, equity, and inclusion in terms of students, I just lost it, like, students' educational experience and resources or something like you want to steer them towards, okay, we want you to tell us something about how you would act in terms of how this impacts students.
I think I get what you're saying. It could be, how do you define diversity, equity, how do you define diversity, equity, inclusion as it relates to a school board or a school district? That's pretty open still, but it doesn't, and it asks for a definition, so they will have to be able to produce something. But it doesn't hand everything.
So could we say, if we said exactly that, and how would you see yourself contributing to that goal as a board member? Because I think there's people who, like, I would be interested in hearing if people have ideas about that or experience in other organizations or
that's
something.
Exciting, yeah, because it'll come from all different areas. I like that.
Okay, so we have that all down here.
Let's see.
Play back the record.
So some board members were interested in removing some of the more specific background questions. Originally, this said that the board has previously asked about what's essentially your experience or your experience in training, your volunteer background, and your educational background. So in listening to this conversation here, I've removed those last two questions and suggest a broader question. Please give a description of your background and experience that prepares you to serve in this position, and that could be parenting, experience with schools, work, training, education, anything that they want to share. So that is one suggestion to replace the previous questions. And then instead of the other two questions, these last two, what does equity mean to you as it relates to K-12 education or as it relates to schools? And if you were on the board, how would you see yourself contributing to the goals of equity, access, and inclusion? Who's getting the mark?
I like education more than schools.
Yeah.
Schools often, it's like the building.
Just maybe.
I think it's equity, can you tell me why you chose access? Cause inclusion and access to me are synonyms and I wanna, and maybe we're not defining it.
Sure, and I think, like I said, it could be diversity, equity, and inclusion, and it could be access, but talking about topics in that area of inclusion and equity. And diversity is a different but related topic. And if you want that word in there instead, we can change that, we can say equity. Like this.
I would almost, I think they overlap. I would almost use access instead of inclusion. I know there's a lot of folks who would prefer to refer to what we call special education as accessible education. And so that feels more inclusive. It also opens the door to talking about things like access to our school choice system, which is not going anywhere as much as we talk about it, at least in the near future. So for me, access is a broader term and inclusion falls under it. I know that inclusion is the I in the DEI, but
No,
I think access in educational settings is more relevant. The way I would answer that question.
It's the civil rights word, not the special ed word.
Absolutely, and it just is a broader term that could lead folks to answering that question in a number of different ways.
Does this get to where?
I think so. I think it, because at first I was like, well, is diversity too obvious, you know? Thinking along the lines of, do we want to hand everything? But I think we'll get answers as to hiring and things like that with that, so.
Diversity can be defined so many different ways too, that it'll be interesting how
To see.
it's defined,
Okay.
especially in a community like Eugene.
Yep.
It's still the question about the background, I still would just eliminate that one.
I had an alternative to that one, see what you think. I had down, what's been your involvement and connection with the 4J district? It could be volunteer, it could be kids in school, it could be I went to school, but I wanna know that they had some kind of involvement or connection.
Could we just keep connection? And
Sure,
then it would be
connection,
Because involvement could imply like how many hours have you carved out to volunteer in the
Exactly.
cafeteria or whatever.
So what has been your connection with the 4J
Right.
school district?
So what has been your, all it's gonna be is connection, Carrie.
Just connection or experience?
I would even just keep connection,
Connection.
because that leaves it open again. Experience might end up meaning like someone's gonna come up and be like, so in second grade.
Stories.
I got stories.
Mrs. Nye gave everybody cupcakes, even those who had birthdays in summer.
Your connection.
Second grade.
Connection too.
Stunk.
Are you seeking to elicit tell us how you've been, have you been a parent here, have you been does saying connection convey that you're asking about the whole range of their historical experience? I was a student here, I was a former parent, but not currently, or do you want to say something about your experience or your connection or?
I used involvement if I was rather, experience does sound real like, but if that is too low, I'm okay with connection, I'm okay with connection there, involvement.
I feel like connection's one of those umbrella words again, where all those other things fall under it. But the connection wouldn't necessarily, I don't know, it could, involvement and experience would leave out like, I am a neighbor to Charlemagne and my experience is that every single morning when I try to leave my driveway, I can't get out, you know, it's just more connection.
And I'm gonna change it.
Right, so, and my involvement is that I go over every morning and let them know. Not that that's gonna happen, but I'm trying to.
I'm
come up
good
a
with it as
ridiculous-
just connection. I think the word experience has the feel of like an
yeah.
interview question. Tell us about
Yeah.
why you'd be a good fit for this job or whatever.
And,
I
you know,
do- but-
just thinking about like
but-
Martina, connection could have been like, I taught students
Yeah.
through this program, and
right.
like, there's so many different.
But I don't know what's the last part. Oh, maybe you're about to answer this question by deleting it. Okay, thank you.
So that's a question, is
Oh.
that
Well-
of interest to the board, if they say, I recently moved here, I don't have a big history with Eugene School District 4J, but I came from elsewhere, do you want to know that? Are you looking to
I do.
hear about that? So is that a relevant part of that question to continue? Or to ask?
I mean, it's possible that they were on other school boards, so I guess that asks for that information,
Or
but
they could be a teacher in Springfield. and
But that
would
could
be-
come under, why are you applying to the 4J school board? Well, I was on the school board somewhere else, I don't know.
that's true.
I guess my point with this one was like, how are you connected with this community? You might be new, say I'm new, I wanna get more connected, that could be an answer someone gives.
I like that, actually.
Keep it simple.
But it's maybe connection to instead of connection with. And then
No, there's no. Sorry, I was saying, because the fuss budgeting style to Eugene School District.
Do we have, I'm wondering as far as this, like, I like this.
Laura,
A preface, is it okay to have a preface that states what our board goals are for the year? And so that's understood, or,
are they on the website?
They are on the website.
Really?
That's a good question. We could add a link to them in the main post that is essentially advertising this.
Okay.
As just add a link to, current board goals, current year board goals. Just to make it very easy for people to research that. They can find it if they look for it. They may not know to look for it. We don't include that link. So we can add that. There's there'll be a brief intro saying the board has 2 vacancies, here's the process, here's your contact information, demographic, availability, eligibility questions, and then these are the open-ended questions. So there is a little bit of preface information, yes.
I just don't wanna, I wouldn't wanna make people feel like we're asking them to address this year's board goals, because we pick 4 goals and they're somewhat limited because there's only 4. And if somebody comes on and says, oh, I have this great idea about science education that you've never thought of and therefore is not one of your goals, I don't wanna make them feel like they must address. I don't remember what our goals were, hiring a new superintendent, getting through the pandemic, and a couple other things.
right, cause it'll
that we
be
didn't
part
have
of
time
creating the
for.
next board goals.
Yeah.
Yeah, just making, I guess, creating the access. For them to be able to find that information is just fine. It reduces the barrier, cause our website is a lot of words.
So I think it's also, the only other thing I'd say, we have 7 questions. I think we should have at least a general limit to how much we want to read if we're reading a lot of applicants. So I don't mean for every question, but do we want to limit it to 3 pages? Let's give something reasonable, because we'll be reading all these, and let people have some parameters as well.
So if I can just share what the past experience has been, is that we have this set up as a web form. People can continue to type into a box, but there is a certain size of box, and that is a guide to people about how much to include, and it helps to shape the amount of information that people share. And people are self-moderating in that, as we compile, applications together, so similar to, the budget committee applications that you've seen in the past. Each application tends to be, you know, 1 to 2 pages with their answers and not more than that. Putting a hard limit, on the, like a character count on it does then, you know, create its own set of issues. We haven't seen this problem in the past where people really deliver a thesis statement with a 20-page document. It just has not been probably experienced before.
Laurel?
I say that weeds them out if they do.
You say what?
It weeds them out if they're that verbose. None of us will have time to talk ever, so.
Gordon?
I think it's a faculty worry, which I share. I feel your pain, but I'm not really worried about people in these applications writing like 17-page thing in 6-point font.
I can let it go then. All right, so we have 7 questions, we're set to go. Everyone's good with these? Looking for Alicia's hand? She got no hand? Good, she's got a thumbs up, all right. So I think we're on to the next agenda item. Okay? All right. Which is looking at the timeline for the superintendent search, which I think you have a handout in front of you with that. Yeah, proposed superintendent interview. This is updated based on conversation recently that we had, well, with Monica and just checking in. We're meeting with Alma tomorrow, so it'd be good to make sure we're sort of moving in the right direction. But they want to have an executive session with us on April 6th. And they want 2 hours or so set aside, and it's to discuss the candidates, that's why it's executive session, and our questions. And so before that, they're going to follow up with employee group representatives, which we know the 3 representatives from the employee groups that will be on the committees, and ask them to have questions, because then we'll be refining them and have that input at that time. And then we are going to be scheduling, I'm waiting to hear the answer to how long, but Alma's going to schedule with the 3 representatives from the employee group to do the anti-bias training they did with us. I imagine any of us would be welcome to sit in again, but not required. So they're going to do that same training. And then we're also going to schedule the first round of interviews, and this was their recommendation. We didn't push back, but because they wanted a little more time to be vetting applicants and then meet with us, and they felt more ready on the 6th. So the week of April 11th through 13th, we're going to keep with 3 committees, because we have 3 employee groups, even though there's 5 of us. And it's one, I think I'm going to actually sit with Maya because she lost the 1 member, so I'm going to be on 2 committees, but we're all going to see all the recordings. We'll just make it so they aren't so sparsely attended. So that's the current plan going forward with those. Unless someone else is dying to be on the 2 committees. Please let me know if you are. And then sometime the week of the 18th or 19th, we'll be selecting the 3 finalists from the first round. So I'll give people a chance. We're going to try to schedule those, since it's 3 separate teams, you know, so that we'll have some time to view the ones that we haven't seen.
So when they say 11th through the 13th, they're not giving us?
I put those down. It's that week. And I just thought if we did it earlier, it gives people more time to look at the recordings, and we could be scheduling them simultaneously. They don't come, and they're separate, we're separate on those subgroups, so it opens up more possibilities. But it could go that week. We just want to be sure everyone, the 3 employee groups.
We're not. Sorry, I'm trying to refer to the thousands of conversations we had about this. we will have the interviews, but then have access to the other
Recorded.
numerous recordings, I'm
Yes.
guessing. So it seems like there's a lot to fit in there, plus a full-time job, so.
So
how
that-
is this working?
Yeah, I think they said they're moving somewhere between 8 and 10. So let's say you're on a committee, there's 3 committees, you probably will be doing 3 interviews yourself, so you'll be sitting in those. Then you'd probably have 6 others to watch.
But you'd have from the 13th to the 18th to catch up on those other interviews.
And
Well, and we could potentially, I've gotta look at the calendar here again,
I'm
'cause
just concerned because it doesn't say time of day, it doesn't say anything.
that's because we're doing a doodle poll. After this gets done, we're gonna send out a doodle poll to set up the interviews. So you will be selecting it, you won't be assigned. You'll be able to say when you're available, Laura, for sure.
But this is everybody that can be part of this,
Yeah.
so I could lose.
Well,
Because most of them will be
you only
on
have to-
paid time.
You only have to coordinate with 2 other people,
For
so.
your interview, it's just 3 interviews and 3 of you. So it'll be you, another board member, and one of the employee group's folks.
Okay,
And everything else is on your own time. Whenever you can fit
Gordon's
it in.
group would be at a different time, it might be simultaneous, but not necessarily.
See how, I think it's gonna be doable, but we'll
It's-
see.
we'll make it work, I just wanna
Yeah.
understand how much I need to dance to make
Yeah.
it work.
Well, I think you'll have probably 3 hours of time to schedule for your interviews, let's say, with 2 other people. And, yeah, you probably have the least flexible schedule, given your work schedule right now, but I might be wrong, but.
Yeah, Gordon doesn't do anything.
I don't do anything.
Well, I work too, but I can't flex, so, okay, great. So that is the plan, and this was relevant because it sounds like we are moving to seat the 2 new board members before we bring them, so I'm thinking that's gonna be that first week in May that people will come, so. I think that was really it for that agenda item. I thought it was related to what we just were talking about. Go ahead, Laura.
Well, discussion wise, I know this is a discussion of timeline, but process, which I brought up earlier, like visits, and I've heard past board members talk about they wish they had more in-depth home visits for previous selections and things like that, so I find that to be an important part of this and would want to have opportunity to be part of that.
Excuse me, Alicia, do you have anything to add about that since you were on the board for that time? I can tell you what I think I've heard about that, but.
Yeah, we did that, not with Gus, but with the previous superintendent, and I thought some good information was gathered. And so I thought it was helpful. It took a little longer, and I think they sent 3 board members and scheduled meetings. So I would support it if we can get 3 board members who are interested in traveling and bringing back that info.
Can I ask Alicia a question?
Yeah,
Alicia, did those visits happen before the finalist interviews or after the interviews? And did you
They-
visit everyone, or did you visit the folks who came up to the top?
I believe we did 3 finalist interviews, and now I can't remember because we had one superintendent that was in 2 different places, but I believe we did 2. I'm sorry, I can't actually remember, but we did limit it and then go to those places, those two people's places.
And was it before or after? the
Before, after.
interview?
I'm sorry, it was after we all interviewed, then they went on the little trip, and then they came back and we processed what they learned, and then we voted. Did that help? Sorry,
Yes.
we're missing the detailed people here. There you go.
So, I remember the last conversation, you were part of that too, Maya, I don't know, this was my takeaway, is that there were mixed feelings about the utility. That it was a lot of time and it was a lot of visiting, but when you go to someone's community, they just put forward what they wanted you to see. And so I got from Mary, and I don't know, you were at the same meeting, that was part of my takeaway.
Mary, throughout the process, if I recall correctly, kind of saw it from both sides.
Yeah.
So she saw the good and the possibility of it not being as informative. But I think if we, approach the visit in a way that we also seek out, people to talk to that aren't just the people presented to us, then, we would get more of a vision that might be more genuine than staged. So, if somebody were to come here, they would, they could say, Superintendent Vanderkart, give us 5 appointments with whoever you wanna choose. Or else they could say, I'm gonna look online and I'm gonna contact the employee groups folks and maybe 2 random PTOs or the Eugene leaders or whatever. So I don't know, I think we could eliminate that concern of it being overly staged by setting it up ourselves.
So, go ahead, Laurel.
That's what I had heard, apparently, it must have been Mary, but I hate to talk for somebody who's not here, but I do remember somebody saying, who had done this before, saying, I think we should have talked to other people.
Yeah.
And it would have been more productive.
I think you're right, because if it wasn't Alicia, it was Mary. And I don't think it was Alicia, and I think Mary did go on the
Mary
trip,
did,
so,
yeah.
yeah.
Can I jump in?
Yeah.
I will tell you that some really important information came out of those trips. Some important information. How we used it, I won't share with you, but it was good. Jim would always say, visit the mayor, ask the mayor, and sit in a coffee shop and just ask people that are coming into a coffee shop, was the other thing people talked about. So just some thoughts.
So how about Maya and I take this to our meeting with Alma tomorrow, come up with their thoughts and bring back, and we'll be having a meeting with them the following Wednesday. So we'll figure out how we could handle that if we want to have more discussion about it, okay?
Before we leave this space, do we wanna just gauge the temperature of the board as to like, are we leaning towards wanting to do that? First, I
Sure.
I think that would be important to know going into the Alma conversation.
I feel like we would, I'm not sure where you're at, but I would want to tell them we definitely want to do this unless there's some like really big logistical roadblock by it, but particularly given what Alicia just said, I feel like unless it's really not feasible or something, then
Laurel?
I agree, and I'm also, I want minimum support for Alma, meaning there's a way that people that you hire could go in and pave the way. And there's a way where it is where you come and you, like exactly what Maya said, that we figure out the process and do it that way.
Maya?
I support that, I love that, I remember Jim Torrey saying similarly, I'm not sure about the mayor per se, but I do think that notion of just going and talking to people, is important, especially if you pick a coffee shop that's near a school.
At lunchtime.
At lunchtime, or first thing in the morning, right after drop off.
Alicia?
I'm for it. I appreciate all the conversation. Go with the stage stuff, but go with the just that person to person piece too. And then we just have to decide. Before I decide if I want to go on one of these trips, I have to find out where they are. No, I'm just kidding. If you have to go to these out of the way places, you have to go and find out. Thanks.
Okay, it looks like we have, does that give us a good sense? Yeah, okay, good. Anything else on this topic? Because we're gonna move on to hearing about items, planning for the information we need and want about the mental health services that are going on and what we want to do with that and other future agenda items. Okay, then I'm gonna ask the superintendent to talk a little bit here.
Alright, so what I'd like is if I've missed the mark, for someone just to interrupt me and say, that's not what I wanted to know. So, I can think back to 2019, when Addie's Act was passed, which was Senate Bill 52. And it gave the district direction on next steps to go and to take. And what I wanna say is, before Addie's Act, we had some very dedicated employees, they were licensed employees, working on ways to work with suicide in response to both train those in the school district. They were working on a plan, a very formalized plan, but they did this as well as another job. So as we looked into it, it was when Superintendent Balderas was still here and I was the assistant superintendent. And when we looked at it, we realized that we were asking people to do their jobs +1. So the idea of somewhere in that whole thing, the idea of getting the person that we have now and then building on it, but the suicide prevention specialist who would be the umbrella person, because we have many of our programs in instruction, in our special ed department, and in diversity and inclusion, equity and inclusion. So we have the programs across the district, and it's just really hard to manage all of the pieces. So we hired one person, and the first thing that we did, well, I guess we did two things. The Senate bill said that we would come up with a plan and we would also come up with a policy. So the board came up with a policy, and all of those groups worked together to come up with the plan that outlined ways that we were going to both train kids, train families, community, and how we would, in the moment when we had something to respond to, and then postvention. So all those trainings include sources of strength, the components that are required in Addie's Law, which means that each level in advisory, depending on what level you are, you might not have advisory, but high school, middle and elementary, talk about pieces of Addie's Law, and it's all grade appropriate. So what they talk about as seniors isn't the same thing, of course, that they talk about in elementary school. We've brought in restorative justice, and in some cases we want to change it to transformative justice, and we're now teaching that, so that all of these are pieces that we move through, and kids and the adults around them learn how to take in the whole child. We did a lot on trauma-informed care about right before the pandemic. So the pandemic has interrupted our PD schedule simply because we haven't really been able to have PD like we used to. We worked with Lane County Public Health and the Lane Education School District, otherwise known as Lane ESD, to put on trainings, QPR, the one that you just signed up for, ASSIST, and all of those help families, community, notice the signs, know what to do, and know what the response might be. In all of that, and I think that Laurel has probably stated this the best, we don't have the acute care that we need in Lane County. So at the beginning of the school year this year, met with Senator Wyden, and he has a heart for it as well. His brother died by suicide, and he is out there really trying to help us get availability for either acute care or licensed training. And we just told them that there's nothing in Lane County, and that when parents or guardians go and try to get help for their kids, it's a 6-week wait, which it just isn't enough. So we also have worked with Roseburg Therapy, and we've had them since before the pandemic, but I can tell that we're using them more because the bill is higher. So it has increased probably fourfold since we started with them in 2020. And they come by, if a kiddo is noticed at a school, we get a referral to Roseburg Therapy, and they come to the school and they work with the family and the kid. So we have all of the other pieces too that goes into that. So we have Lines for Life, which we talked about, and that is a line that kids can call that is personed by kids on the other end that are trained. We work with Lane County Behavioral Health to train our community, and they're the ones that do the QPR training, which is question, persuade, and refer. Lane ESD does a whole nother set of trainings, and that's assist, which many of our counselors and all of our people who respond sat right in here before the pandemic hit and got a training in here. And then when something happens, Oregon Health Authority can be brought in, and they also provide support for us. I met with the University of Oregon, and they said if we could have any teacher training that you wanted. I said counselors, I said people that can help us with our kids that need extra support. And so they were working on it. Now it looks like maybe they moved that support to Portland, but that was the idea, I think, behind it, is that we need to train our adults around us to be able to help us with our response and our prevention. So there are lots of pieces that come into it, and I think what I would like to see is that we come to you with probably what we've done, what we plan to do. I heard at the meeting on Monday, at the budget meeting, that people wanted job descriptions, and all of that is, within our reach. I also, when the pandemic started, so this is when SIA first came into action. Before the pandemic, we planned on hiring social workers and mental health therapists. Pandemic hits, and we really hire at wraparound services, both in Spanish and in English. And then we had 4 social workers, and we've not been able to hire a mental health therapist. We've had them posted, and we just haven't been able to hire anyone. We've had people apply, and perhaps they didn't have any background in working with kids. Like, I wasn't in on those interviews, but perhaps what we needed wasn't what either they wanted to offer or what they could offer. Hoots does come to each one of the high schools, including Echo behind us, but they are in the mornings from 8 to noon. So the request of the budget committee that we have something in the evenings for parents to go to, we don't have that yet, but I wrote it down on the list. So we could go in depth on any or all of this, and I don't know what the board, what pieces they want to know more about, but we are building. So there's a program at the University of Oregon that they're offering it to us for free for 2 buildings, but that didn't seem fair. So we're trying to figure out if we should pay for the other. We have 4 comprehensives, but I always include Echo in the, so when you hear 5, that's the 5. And we are building. So it's been almost 2.5 years since we had Addie's Act passed, and we have worked to create a plan, but I believe that plans are all living, and that we update them as we go and figure out what's not working and what is working. And we've heard a lot in the last little bit about what's not working. And I think when we talk about communication, when I'm gonna use the word event, even though it's not the right word, but when something really terrible happens in a building and parents don't want us to talk about it, that's really hard. So perhaps we could have some discussion around how we could best manage that. And I'm thinking about the most recent issues that we were having to work through. So the plan is extensive. I sent it out. We do work very closely with a lot of our local, and I guess if Portland's close, but throughout the state. And in our presentation that we did on Monday at the conference, right before we went on stage, I was partnering with 3 other people from other states, and one of them got a text right before we went on, and they had a completed suicide in their school district. And so what I know is that there's more to do, and we need to do more, and it really does take people dedicated to this job. So I feel like having the person with the umbrella, making sure that all the different departments are working together on it, is a really, really good thing to have. And we're the only one in the state that has that. And I feel like we've made progress. Yeah.
Thank you. So we want to talk about what we want to hear and how we want to approach it. Go ahead, Laurel.
So, I sent several emails starting in mid-March, maybe right before mid-March, wanting to know what we have and having it clearly defined, and I don't have that. You said you sent something out, but I don't believe I have that.
Oh, I sent the plan and the policy to you. I'm pretty sure, send it.
I remember the policy you were talking about last week?
Yeah.
Spring break?
Yeah.
Okay. So I have said I would like a 0 tolerance policy. That doesn't mean we know it's impossible to stop everything that happens, but to have a 0 tolerance policy, that means that we work really closely with authorities in the state and the county that do this work. I've heard of a universal screening and safety planning that has been offered to the district, and we have not taken advantage of it. I believe this should happen in all of our high schools, but particularly right away in South Eugene. Oregon Health Authority provides it, and what they provide after that is referrals and resource, not a phone call, like try this number, maybe it'll work. Connecting identified students to resource, and that takes some of that out of your hand, right? Staffing. I know others can speak better on this, but I am concerned of the chain of command where our suicide prevention team resides. Why are they not under our other mental health providers? Why are they under our security, head of security?
They're under CAT. They're based out of SPED.
They're based by what I heard their boss was Carrie.
It's Brooke, CAT, and they work closely with Carrie.
So Carrie's not their supervisor.
No, they're licensed, so they have to have a licensed staff who's an administrator.
And that is
either CAT or Brooke.
And who above them works in mental health? Who supervises? Who's a mental health person who supervises? Like their job? We just talked about the amount of people we have: psychologists, some, not as many as we want, social workers. We have, I call them guidance counselors, but they're called counselors here. All these people are identified by the district as being part of the mental health system, but many of them have very specific roles that don't actually apply to mental health. So in that kind of work, it's very important to have people that are trained in that. And so while they are trained, and I have specifically heard that, I'm trying to, my notes from Angie Meyer is doing amazing work. And I would just like to make sure, I want to say that out because I'm excited about to know that, because until somebody not at this district mentioned that, I didn't know that we had, that somebody was taking initiative and doing an amazing work. I have also heard that the communication, which you mentioned, so I appreciate you mentioning it. It's very important that we allow for communication after an event, as you say. It's, I know in this district, we work on the perception of liability a lot, which is unfortunate in my way of looking at this, especially when it involves children's lives. I absolutely want to make sure that it is understood that we are much more liable by stifling conversation and not getting information into parents and children. The last, I believe it was the last, sad, I don't even like to say the word, the last child that died by suicide. Children at school found out about it before their parents even knew to help them about it. We have a deep communication problem. I know it's not a comfortable thing to talk about, but I also know FERPA does not preclude us having the conversations in our schools. And it's very important because the data shows if it's not talked about and if there's not absolute way to reach, if not all, most of our children, we will have more, and we've seen this. And so I know nobody is at fault. This is sad and tragic and shouldn't happen, and everybody who works in this district that I've met cares a lot about children. But I also want to be a board member who says, the way we are doing it is not enough. And if I have ability, and there will never be a real good count for this, we will just have less of a number to save any more children. And always, in the work I do every day at Lane County, and the work that I see other people do, it's about getting information out. And I really want to know how we can do this right away. Like the first thing, we do universal screening and safety planning with our South Eugene High School, and then bring it to everyone.
So Laurel, can I just ask you that was good. So who does, is it OHA that's doing the universal safety and screening? Did you say that?
Yes, I think they work with Lane County Public Health, but yes.
Oh, so it's a
But
Roger
it's
Brubaker
OHA
and that.
who provides the service.
Okay, because I think, yeah, we should probably find out what that is. It's Roger, probably.
It's Roger.
I'm just gonna say everything I have so that other people can talk after me.
Okay, no, it'll help us follow up to know how to structure
Oh, yeah.
the information. Yeah, that'd be great, okay.
Social workers, I want to know what we have to do to authorize a higher pay, because one thing we know in this market, it's hard to hire people, and we also know social workers can make more money working privately. So, but we also know in this community, we have a lot of amazing social workers that if we hit the right mark, which is we don't have to make them rich, but we can absolutely they want to be there, they want to help. We need to hit that mark where we can hire them, and that also will bring us seasoned professional social workers have been doing this work. I would like a chance. I have a good friend who has worked for Ophelia's Place for several years, River Alon, who is also a life coach for teenagers. So I have an idea, but I want to use River's words. She gave me the idea, but she didn't know she gave me the idea. She was just telling me what she does. In that, here, I'm just gonna read it. Supportive life coaching offers an opportunity for young people to feel seen and heard, have a safe space to discuss challenges, set goals, and practice various life skills such as assertive communication, time stress management, and boundaries. Coaching is ideal for young people who are not experiencing mental health crisis, but do need support and encouragement. This is preventative measures. Coaching is a prevention effort that can help promote a positive school culture and help meet the needs of youth who need help but not a diagnosis. By working with experienced coaches, students can access support and develop skills without being funneled into an overextended mental health system, which currently means long wait lists and diagnosis. Coaches can work with existing school mental health providers and social workers to ensure that students are appropriately referred and directed to the right level of provider based on their needs. Coaches are often very effective for short-term support, such as helping students learn self-regulation, task management, and self-efficacy. As part of a wider network of community support, coaches represent an underutilized resource promoting student wellness and success. My partner does coaching. I know it sounds like something like only people that, wear a lot of jewelry and can afford something like this does. I don't care about the name for it. I see it as a way for us to do something, as you say, we're doing things that our other districts aren't doing. And I think adding something like this can only be of service to our educators and our students. Something besides only the model that comes out of the U of O and mental health programs. Something different, but also has a proven track record, and these are people that are certified. They're not just, everybody can't just say, I can coach. I mean, they can, but there are a certification, and I'm sure that's something we would want. And you mentioned Hoots. I would like to find out how we can fund Hoots. Are there a program they would need to staff, probably staff more? How can we add to our budget to fund them to work at a time, if we add the staff during the day that, can address what is happening in schools and support school periods, can they do the after school time? I know I'm not in charge of figuring all this out. I absolutely understand that. My reason for saying this is I'm aware there's a crisis center that's going to, for youth, that will have, it's going to be youth focused. It's about 2 years out. So it will not have to be something that's that we permanently fund. It could be something we fund, I believe, what are the funds that we talked about that end in about 2 years, or 3 or something. So it could be funded short-term as a way to say we are trying to meet the needs that are here, that we see now, and that we know something is coming at that. And so these are all the things I've been working and thinking very hard about what this is, what is happening. I don't want to be the board member that just says, why are you letting this happen? I want to be a service and help, and to hopefully we work all together to, I want to say eliminate. I know that's not absolutely possible, but I want it. So I want to eliminate And if we can reach those kids that absolutely we know are being missed, I think we can do this. I think it involves the mindset of saying, we're gonna talk about it, we're going to it doesn't work to hide from it. FERPA does not stop us from having the conversations. I wanna say that one more time, because the conversation. This is not, I know I mentioned students a lot, but I know this is absolutely traumatic to our staff that have gone through this at South Eugene this year since January 4 time. So I would really like if we can look at some of these things, and I'll give my other board members a chance, and I appreciate your time for this, everybody. Thank you.
Gordon.
Thanks. Like when I think about the next, we're talking about what would we like a session on this to look like. I feel like you do that it's important that we frame it it's not about is anybody at fault, and at the same, kind of the flip side is that is not wanting to hear from the district, oh, but these are all the things we're doing, which is the kind of thing one would say defensively if you're accused of being at fault. I'm impressed with things that are doing, and also, obviously it's not enough. The fact that it's not enough is not because of something wrong in 4J that's happening all over the country. It's not the fault of somebody here, it's just we're facing this thing, and the question is, what else can we and should we be doing to make this better? I don't know, I mean, probably maybe everybody here is closer to having some idea of what the answer is, but I would like to have something where we hear from Kat and Brooke and whoever else are the right people, and that we also hear from some teachers, maybe from Hoots, maybe from Ophelia's Place, maybe from Lane County, and that we just, we're not going to be making a decision at this meeting, but we try to get the best ideas that we can. And I'd like to be able to look at it. I know there's like mental health focused specifically on suicide prevention, and then there's the issue of what do we do after something happens. And I think that I'd be interested in looking at a third category, which is, are there things we could do in the daily experience of school that might lower the pressure that puts more people over the edge? And I'm been talking for a long time thinking about homework or more recess. I don't really know what these things are. And staffing, honestly, I don't know if what we need is a lower ratio of students to counselors, or we need social workers or something else. And I'd like to hear about those. And I know that we have limited, obviously we have limited money. And at the same time, I would guess that all of us, if somebody said, you know what, if you take $1 million or $2 million from here and don't do that thing and put it here, it will actually make a difference on this, I think we would all do that. And I don't know what that is. So I would be interested in having something that's presentation from district leadership, also from people who are working, teachers on the ground, outside experts, and trying to focus not on what have we been doing and is it enough or is it not enough, and take it totally out of the realm of is this criticism or something like that, and just like assuming everybody's been doing the right thing and we're hit with a wave that is national that we need to figure out what to do about. What is what could we do? That's what
Can I just make a clarification? River Alon works for Ophelia's Place, but it's her private practice to do coaching, and I didn't make that clear, so thanks for helping me make that clear.
Maya.
So I have a couple of things I would like to include in our next steps, whether it's immediate or more long-term. One thing to note, I really appreciate knowing that the two folks, Angie Meyer and I know you mentioned the behavior threat assessment specialist, who I assume is Sherry Boylan. When you look their names up on the 4J staff directory, they are both listed under the Department of Public Safety. So if that's an oversight, that would probably be good to correct, just so that there's not the chance that somebody looks their name up and gets the wrong idea. And I really appreciate that. I know that the movement with addressing suicidality has been to very much move away from any type of criminalizing, and so I'm really happy to hear that that's not the case with us. When we talk about what Gordon was mentioning in terms of bringing in folks, I want to remind us that there is a group who I had suggested in the fall come and present to us because they did quite a bit of work under, alongside Hoots before Hoots accepted their contracts with the school district to help Hoots get ready. And there's some really wonderful ideas that are included in that I think would be exceptionally important for us to listen to. So I want to suggest once again that we do invite that group in to talk with us. It includes Penny from Hoots, but it also includes some 4J admin, teachers, parents, and an expert from the University of Oregon in restorative work. I think she uses the term restorative, so I'm sticking with that to cover her. And so that group right there is pretty representative of a lot of the folks that Gordon mentioned, not exclusive, not completely inclusive, but we could benefit and take advantage of the work that they've already put in and listen to them.
What's the group's name?
It's an informal group.
Joel was on it.
Joel was on it, so I think Peter Tromba was on it. Jenny Canada, Penny, I can never remember her last name, I apologize.
You sent us a report.
I did, I sent it, but you know, when it's on paper, it's different than
Yeah.
hearing it and
No.
letting people flesh out and answer questions. They talk a lot about community-based schools, referencing, for example, the Sun schools up in Multnomah County that offer a really wonderful model that we could even consider here. Or I would recommend we consider here, and maybe it means that some of us as board members go up and learn about what they're doing.
I visited them.
That's awesome, I would love to do the same, and with the intention of learning how the work they're doing might impact this particular, it's so inclusive and holistic, but we kind of have a very intentional goal here. I wanna also, Laurel had brought up, and I wanna second making a movement towards creating a committee and making it an advisory committee instead of a board subcommittee. And maybe modeling it after our equity committee, and this would be the long-term vision that I mentioned versus like, hey, next week, let's do this. We know that those committees take a little while to form, and especially when they're done thoughtfully and include voices that we don't always hear from. So I'd like to suggest that we do that and get moving on that, because as I said, they take a while. And then the last one is probably not everyone's favorite topic, but it's one of mine. And when I think about what we could do every day in the schools, and I think about what hasn't been working, and I know this is my position and not everyone will agree, but I think it would be really important for us to dig deep into how our schools are impacted by behaviorism. And we have been using PBIS for decades, and at the same time, behavior, and I'm putting quotes around it because it's a very uncomfortable word for me to use, has not, we haven't had the results that we have hoped for. So I would like to hear from Wayne ESD about their, and I know that you have some background in this, Judy, so I'd like to hear from you as well, about their work using cooperative problem solving. And I would like to, there was a quote, and I don't mean to be all like, here's a woo-woo quote for you, but I know that in at least my kids' school at the elementary level, they've been talking about conscious discipline. And one of the family therapists who works a lot with conscious discipline is Ashley Warner. And she has this quote that I just think is so beautiful, and it is the quote that kind of drives home the need to really question behaviorism as the foundational guide by which we allow our kids to develop as whole, independent human beings. And the quote is, "Beneath every behavior, there is a feeling, and beneath each feeling is a need. And when we meet that need, rather than focus on the behavior, we begin to deal with the cause, not the symptom." So I would like to introduce the idea of I don't know what the two schools are that or the program for the University of Oregon, but I would like us to really start digging deep into thinking about how behaviorism impacts our students, and in particular, our most vulnerable students. PBIS is great for the kids who don't need it. The kids who need it are so often harmed by it. And so often we don't know that the harm has happened until years later, when the healing takes so much work and often means that kids can't be in our school system anymore. So I'll leave it there.
I just would like to follow up a little bit, because go ahead, Laura.
It's more definitions for the public at large. I think it would be helpful for babyism and, did you say PBIS?
Positive behavior
Mhm.
interventions and supports, yeah.
We need some, probably to get that information out to
Good.
people, because they won't all understand.
Good point, and it's collaborative problem solving, just so you know, but
Then
no,
I
it's
said cooperative.
yeah, that's
I wrote
okay.
down collaborative, but.
But there are,
more
so
cooperation.
I guess I just wanna say, and this could be a presentation to see, because I know we're doing conscious discipline groups in the district now, is that, at least that's what I've heard we are, for parents, but I might be wrong.
I can tell you what it looks like at my kid's school. It's an ongoing series in the evenings, and it's voluntary, and it is very much focused on parenting.
Yes.
As opposed to
How they're-
a concept that is integrated into how students are treated in our.
Relevant conversation, I think that would be one topic at some point I'd like to hear about, which is the behavior framework again, how, because actually, I think it's a bit of at least, and this is work I've been involved with for a long time, at least in early learning, that people use the PBIS framework, but all of these kinds of programs are incorporated in, because behavior is about communication and teaching and skill, things that kids are maybe not getting. So maybe I don't know what terms we're using or whatever, but I would like to see what fits in those frameworks, because I know individual staff people are doing some of those, and again, I don't want to get hung up in what's the model or what's this. I want to get the right services, but I know some of that is happening and how that fits. So that could be one of those things we need to hear about. It might not be the most urgent one right now, if we really want to get to the looking at what really happens. Maybe we'll, I think it's important to know what we're doing, but not spend the majority of time, whether that comes in writing, because then I know the district already has identified gaps. We've identified gaps, talking about what are the ways that we can address some of the gaps and what are some of the plans. So I think that's sort of pretty basic, but a really constructive way to go about looking at these chunks.
Sorry, go ahead.
I just wanted to add, we approved an equity lens, we voted on it, it is approved, but we don't have yet to see it really used in the way that we see it. It's been on the agenda and I
Just got moved again.
and things continually get moved, but I think it's also self-explanatory. It can be used. I think it's important that, at least as part of the address to this, the threat assessment needs to have the equity lens applied to it, because as far as I understand, it's a process that's inequitable and actually racist. So we need to, as a district, look at what we're doing and change it if that is part of the trauma we're causing.
Gordon.
I also would be interested in looking at alternatives to PBS and behaviorism, although I think I know less about it than the two of you, and I especially like the idea that if we think there's a place where there's a model that is actually working, to go visit that and see what it looks like, that that both of you were talking about. Because I mean, for me, I'm sitting like, I don't know, do we need this, do we need that, but if we think there's a place that is doing something that's working better than what we're doing, I think the idea of going to visit them and see what we can take from that be a great thing to do.
And just to briefly state, in the meantime, going somewhere is a lot more difficult than bringing someone here. And one of the people on that group that worked with Hoops is Jay Breslow, who used to work for Sun as either principal or coordinator, so he's, right down the street, so that's quicker.
Yeah, Sun is also, some of the wraparound work we're doing is very much like the Sun model, and it's evolved over time. I know people at Latino Network there that have worked closely with it too, but it could be that we have some of those components that we've been moving this year with wraparound. I know Gladstone has a whole, Gladstone School District has a trauma-informed system in their schools, and that's where I got the idea where these programs like zones of regulation and collaborative problem solving, they're all in this framework about kids getting different levels. So there are ways to sort of move what we have and really enhance those things in a very intentional way, so.
Can I?
Go ahead, Gordon.
I kind of have a process question, which is, like, I've heard, I don't know, 6 or 7 different things. It sounds like, oh, we should hear from these people, or we should hear from those people. And I just want to figure out, like, are we gonna make a list? Do we, like, how are we, it feels like there's things that we should capture, and I'm not sure what the plan is.
Well, my thought about this was to get people's input, and then, and I wanted the superintendent to hear and get a chance, so that we would bring forward at our next board meeting sort of an idea of how we would do this, and we can respond to, we could probably get it in writing before, what chunks and how we'll approach each piece. Laura.
I agree with that. I would like something, perhaps we need to have the conversation though today about the universal screening and safety planning. Because that is a response to, that needs to happen right after, and apparently we have been offered it, are not doing it, and so it'd be really great if.
Do you mind letting me know who offered it to us so I can follow that up?
I don't know, I would imagine it's OHA, or perhaps public health. That's the people who do it, and so I would think that you and your staff would have that information already.
Can you just say a little bit more about whether it was offered or not? If it's a good thing, we should be looking at it. Can you say a little more about what it is?
As far as I understand it, because this is not what I do every day, I just talk to a lot of people who do this kind of work. And as far as I understand it, it's kind of along the lines of what you've been asking for, like to take an understanding of where staff, was it for staffing that you asked for part of one of our board goals?
Lots of things, yeah, oh, yeah.
Yeah, and doing a complete, having a team come in and do this universal screening and safety planning for suicide in South Eugene because of everything that's just happened there. And in that, it is a known, as far as I understand, again, I'm not the professional who does it, it is known that it works. What people sometimes balk at is having it known that this is happening, so we already know that it's happening.
Is it like a team of people who come in and do some kind of comprehensive assessment and then tell us what they think we need to add?
That is what I understand, yes, that's what I understand. And when they identify, they don't just say, hey, you got a problem, good luck. They connect them to services, because unless you have a closed system, especially on something that's state level, as far as all the dealings I've had with state, it just stops. So if it's a closed system, it means they do the work to find out what's going on, and also they make sure the connection happens.
So I think I'm gonna suggest that you start with Roger Brubaker and Doug Gouge, because I met with them a while back. They were working on an assessment, and I know you know them, right, from Lake County Public Health. Let's start there, because they also get connected with OHA. And because I was pulled in to consult on a version of it they were doing for early learning. And they're the two that have worked on an assessment there, so I know we're connected. So I'm gonna just say we could start by asking them. If it's not that assessment they've worked on, they'd be plugged into Oregon Health Authority and should know.
Oh, they, yeah.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
Okay, does that help?
Yeah.
I also know that from working at, I used to work for Health and Human Services, they have life skills training that they will bring to the schools. So that is something that, that public health will bring to schools, and we just have to say yes.
So anyhow, I'm hearing, we will, I think, try to pull this together in chunks, but what I'm hearing, Laurel, is where you'd like to start, and if no one is with this suggestion of looking if there is the assessment that was offered and what that has to offer, et cetera. Yeah.
Yes, I think
Okay,
it's
I think I
imperative,
just want to be sure that's what I heard.
and it
Yeah.
has to happen soon.
Okay.
It can't be something that we talk about and then 3 months later, we're like, wish we did that.
Well, we'll put this on then as a priority to talk about the plan and maybe the one agenda item at our next board meeting. Does that sound okay?
When is our next board meeting?
April 20th, when we have the 6th in executive session, we have the potential for the 13th meeting as well.
This is,
13th.
this is something that the superintendent has authority to move forward on their own.
Okay, good.
This is
She'll
just
give it
an
up.
idea to bring forward, but it's not something we have to tell them to do.
Great.
I mean,
Oh, Alicia, sorry.
No worries, thanks. Well, a lot of good ideas have been floated, and I appreciate it. I know I called the superintendent with some resources that I was curious that if she knew about or looked into, because I know we as a board want to do something. We want to do better for our students. But, again, I have to say, and it's hard because, this is, as Laurel said, she used to work for Health and Human Services, and so did I. And so know a little something about what's going on with those systems. And I really want to make sure we understand our role, which is to be the people, in my opinion, to say something's got to change, we need to do better. It's not the what, we talk about the what we want to improve, and we look at the professionals for the how, and we give them all these suggestions. But that's really important because it is looking at the people within our district for making the best choices. Because my degree in education from Idaho State from the 80s does not really benefit or make me the professional, even though, like I said, I've had a lot of experience in my professional career that the professionals in the district have. So it's just really important that we say that, because we're all trying to do better and we're all throwing out ideas. And as Laurel said, you don't want to wait, but if we're chasing all these ideas, how do we prioritize those? And we need to hear those priorities. That's our job, is to help with that. So my 2 cents. Thanks.
Thanks, Alicia. Okay, do you want, I think we're gonna have to let the superintendent sit with all this information and come back with us with what you think would be helpful from the board, and except, does that sound doable for you?
Well, I still don't really know what you wanna, do you wanna hear anything from anyone? You might not, maybe you just want us to work on what you gave me, I don't know.
So maybe we want different things. What I would like, if kind of from everybody, but including from the senior staff of the district, if people said, look, if we had an extra $1 million or $2 million, like this is what we think we could do that might make things better, right? On top of all the things that we're already doing. I feel like that's what I want to know from everybody. And I guess my process question is, I thought that tonight, this is just in the interest of not being in an endless process and without actually getting to the thing. Like I thought tonight was to say, what do we want to see in a presentation like in a couple of weeks? And I'm a little concerned if we say, in a couple of weeks, come back to us with ideas for what we might want to see in a presentation, and then we'll talk about it. Again, that we're like
Thank you.
in a loop that might not be helpful. And even if we just start with one part of it, and it's not kind of like if we bring in this group or we bring in, I don't know, the LINCAP, the OHA people or something, and hear whatever's the best thinking from district leadership. Okay, we know there's more to do, but let's do something concrete and not just keep planning.
I think that's exactly the goal, so let me just respond to that. And we're definitely, I think we do need to hear what's going on, because our suggestions are not helpful unless we know what already is happening. So it's hard, but it doesn't, again, those can be done, and I know you had a document you were working on, and it seems to me the logical, maybe 3 chunks would be looking at what do we do when there's an incident? What is that response at the heightened place? Another would be what do we do before it? Or when it happens, what do we do after, which addresses that, how do we communicate with people, what is going on? And from your perspective and from our perspective, you've heard some of the gaps. Are there things you're still planning to do that are out there? Okay, so that would be one chunk. The other chunk for sure is prevention kind of things. What are the everyday things we're doing in school? We have the behavior framework. How is that working? What are some of these other ideas? Are we folding in collaborative problem solving? Are there other things like conscious discipline which are happening with parents? Or what's the thinking there? So that's the prevention. And I'm not sure what the middle chunk is, if there is a middle chunk, but there might be, which might be things like life coaching, more preventative, but at a higher level.
I think
Laurel's had her hand up, and then Maya.
And then
So I would encourage you to listen back to what has been said, because I heard many different requests for information and knowledge, and to understand why, like when it was mentioned that when you go to the website, it says their boss is Carrie Skinner. So that is disconcerting to see, and then to hear, oh no, that's not really true. But also who's in charge and are there plans to put somebody in charge that actually has the background to have authority over the staff, that has the background in suicide prevention? If not, can we send them for more training if they don't have it yet? I mentioned several things where I want to know information, and so it's concerning when I hear I don't even know what you want, because I felt like I spewed a lot of information of what I wanted out, and it's just.
Well, I think we were just trying to, there's so much, I agree, and I think I took a lot of notes, I think the superintendent did, so I'm just trying to figure out a way, to Gordon's point, is how are we gonna approach these? So if we're gonna have, and I think a lot of the things you suggested fit in each one of those categories. So if we talked about the asked to get information about what is going on. So it could be, I know there's been requests for position descriptions, what positions are under there, who supervises, how do those happen, and how do we approach it, kind of thing, would cover a lot of your requests. But
It would cover a bit to understand, because it doesn't say, so my understanding for school psychologists is they mostly do 504s and IEPs. My kids have interacted with them, but only at those times, or behavioral plans. The reality is that most people, when they think of a school psychologist, think of as they understand what a psychologist is. Most people that aren't connected to schools.
Mhm.
And so being very clear about what people's roles are and what they do and what they cannot do are not part of. Like, we understand school counselors are the same ones, this was mentioned at a previous board meeting, are the same people that tell you that you're failing math or such. I don't know if any teenager is going to go back to talk to that person about personal problems. When I tell my son he's failed at something, he doesn't be like, let's talk about something else now. He's just gone and he's doing his own thing. So the reality is, understanding that is super important. I also want to, I know this is all umbrellaed under mental health, and I'm concerned that it's all just huge under mental health. I feel like taking it in pieces of different sections is really important, because what we've created is a massive, just in this conversation, and there's more than this, a massive amount of information needed. So I think we need to separate suicide prevention, stop me if I'm saying this wrong, Maya, but behavioral interventions and that, and this is what I've just heard here, and you said something else, I'm sorry.
Well, that's what I was suggesting. How do we, so would that work for you if we did the suicide?
I heard a timeline on yours. I'm kind of thinking there's different subjects that in right now.
Yes.
What is imperative, it's all important, but what is imperative is that we address suicide prevention at differently than how we are. Because while we're starting to do the work, our history in this is that it's not enough. And I think it's wonderful that we have some great staff doing this work, and I want to make sure that the funds are there and the ability, and it's not something that they have to come back, that you have to come back and go, by the way, we need to know if we can have this kind of money. I want them to be able to say, we are funding this because it's absolutely important. And also it has nothing to do with, not policing is the only word that came to my head, but it's not
Public
correct
safety
word.
is what you're saying.
Yes, thank you.
Mike?
I don't wanna complicate it, but I feel like they're all integrated and we need to treat them holistically. But that's a question of approach. I would love, if we're going to be receiving the report or summary of the what, I would love for that to be accompanied by the who. And I'm picturing kind of like a directory of care or something like that, that could also be shared with staff. I've heard staff say, we know new positions have been added, but we don't know who they are or what they do. So just something comprehensive that lets us know who does what where, and you know, however comprehensive that could be, you know, the more the better. And having that shared out with staff would be crucial so that they're not reinventing the wheel every time somebody needs a particular type of care that somebody in the district is being tasked with. And I'm thinking also just, it always needs to be said, but like, I know how much caseload impacts that. So maybe a little bit of an exploration of what our caseloads look like. For example, and this could be inaccurate because I don't know if I should trust the staff directory, but according to the staff directory, it looks like we have 15 psychologists. And if we have 15 psychologists and conservatively estimating 16,000 students, that's a caseload of like approximately 1,060 students per person. So it makes sense that they're overwhelmed with IEPs. I know that they are available technically, job description wise, for mental health support, but are they time wise? So it would, right, I know. So I would just also like that to be in part of the who, the what is also the how much. So how much, what is the caseload for those student services that fall under this broad umbrella? Just, you know, even if it's just, you know, quick math, it doesn't have to be, you know, down to turning humans into fractions, because they should be whole. But just getting an idea of just how in the thick of it are we with this overwhelming, you know, deterrent known as the caseload overload.
Gordon?
So again, I'll if everybody else wants to do something else, that's okay, but My proposal for a next meeting would be that we hear from Kat and whoever else in the senior district leadership, that we hear from the people who I think you both mentioned as like people who do those kind of assessments. Right, you mentioned it, and then you mentioned a couple of names. Why don't we start with so and so and so and so, and that we hear from the group that you mentioned. And what I would like to get from the, and I'll hear anything, but what I'm most interested in from district leadership is not so much like, here's the report on everything we're doing, because that feels like, let us show you that we're really working hard enough. And I don't think anybody has any doubt, right, that everybody is working extremely hard. What I'd love to hear is people who either say, here's a thing we're doing that we think works pretty well, and if we could do 5 times more of it, that would be good. Or here's a thing we heard of that they're doing in Indianapolis that we don't have backing from the state or whatever, but we think would be good and we wish we could do. Kind of based on from the point of view of district leadership, based on experience so far, the direction that you think. And then, in terms of what your point, Alicia, about, if Alicia's still there, like I feel like I'm the least expert, but I feel like this is not, like there's nobody who's an expert on this in the way that you could be like an expert in, how to fix a car or a medical doctor, right? Everybody in the country is struggling with this. So I feel like we need to reach out broader than we normally would. And it's certainly not me, but it feels like it's a little different than, like I think we could play a useful role in kind of being a forum for some of that, hearing some of that, beyond just saying, there's a problem, what are you gonna do? Which we've already said and nobody needs us to say.
So I think I hear you, so I'm just, I don't wanna let go completely about understanding what is, and it doesn't have to be in a presentation, only because I think we sometimes waste time making suggestions of things that are already happening. It's just important and it's respectful, and there's been a lot going on. So the important thing we wanna know is, what do you need more of and how can we support you? I mean, that's what I heard from you, and that's ultimately where we want to get, and we want to at least build some kind of foundation. And again, it doesn't have to take tons of time, it can be in writing. So, Laura.
I would like to state again that the assessment, I can't remember exactly how to say it, should be started as soon as possible, and it shouldn't wait 2 weeks. And that is something we don't have to weigh in on. We'd love to hear how it's working well, and if it's been a help to the staff and students at South Eugene. But I think it's something that the issue is, it needs to happen. And I don't think, I guess if we have to write policy to make it happen, that's unfortunate, because it will be weeks out. And I'd rather just to know that it's going to happen.
Superintendent.
Yeah, I was just gonna say thank you for that last half hour, because I came in thinking I was letting you know what we were doing on suicide prevention, and then you all had ideas about other things. I just didn't understand what we were doing, so I was just trying to figure it out in the moment. So appreciate the half hour explanation and giving it a second go, so thank you.
So I think the superintendent's going to follow up and find out about what this is and I mean, right, at least we'll do the best we can. We'll start with Roger and Doug and see if you can find out what that is.
I'm going to follow up on the survey over at South Eugene High School with Lane County Behavioral Services.
Perfect.
And you said this, so
I meant the
it's
survey.
public health,
Yeah.
I thought it was behavior.
No, it's public health.
Okay, yes.
Yeah.
Lane
It
County.
would be public health or OHA. That's not the same as behavioral services.
Yeah. Okay.
Alicia?
Oh, Alicia.
FYI, it's behavioral health. So I agree with Gordon. We don't just say we want to fix it. We look at ideas and throw them out. And Judy, I thought you nailed it with what do you need and how can we help? And I think those are the questions we absolutely should be asking. We have control over the budget, so those are also really important places that we have the ability to affect what services are in the district. So appreciate it. I'm looking forward to it. I'm also really interested in Maya. I believe you talked about the consortium of folks that came together, and that may be something that we want to hear from leadership to ponder whether that's something we want to hear from in the next little while to help ourselves get a little more educated on the community as a whole. Okay, thanks.
Great, okay, I think we have enough to go on and massage and leadership, and I think we'll have to, I really appreciate your point, Maya, because this is a holistic approach and all goes together. We might have to look at it in segments, unfortunately, but at some point we should keep that in mind, because I agree. And so however we can keep pulling those strings together, the better.
Before you adjourn, there's one thing, before you adjourn, there's one thing that I just wanna bring up, in terms of our leadership schedule. I'm scheduled to be the third person next time. Should we just declare it that we are moving it so that it would be Alicia and then rearrange the dates and make sure people know that they have new dates?
Great suggestion. Are people okay with us doing that, just rearranging that schedule with the new, okay, good.
I will need to know
Yeah,
the date.
we'll try to keep you on the dates that you're on as much as possible. Would that be helpful to you, Laura?
Yeah, that, it may be that we have new people by the end of the
Yeah.
too.
Okay. All right, thank you for bringing that up. And I think that we're asking for other agenda items for future meetings, but I'm thinking that we really have a full plate. And if we could just adjourn here, that would be my preference. Everyone okay with that?
No, I have two things.
Okay, then we'll get Laura's two things.
I would like a discussion on when a change of a board meeting happens, because it is written that it can only happen with a vote of the full board, yet I can keep being told that that's not accurate. And so I read well, I can see what's written. It's very problematic to me when I can see that something is written in a certain way and that other people are deciding that is not true. So I think as a board, we need to decide what this rule is and stick to it. The second part I have is adding a discussion of white supremacy culture, and to have it a reading at the beginning of every board meeting. I have brought a document, I printed a lot of them, but I guess I imagine we had a full board still, because I have way more than I need, so I can leave some with staff if people wanna see it. I don't propose we read all of this, but I would like to talk as a board, what we would like to do, and if we would be agreeable to adding this to the beginning of our board meeting. I know there are other boards in Oregon that do this.
So is it doing a reading before as
Yes.
part of the board meeting? Okay.
Yes.
Can you email us a document?
That would be easier,
Thanks.
unless you would like 7 or 8 copies.
Oh. Okay. Thank you.
I'd love a copy if you have an additional.
Oh, you know what? I do. I absolutely do.
So is it available on email?
Yes, it
Okay,
is. That's
okay.
where I got it from.
Thank you.
It's from the Minnesota Historical Society. I guess they read it there.
All right.
I wanna say this. I think if I've doubled up anything, I'm sure you'll be able to figure it out.
Thank you. Okay, are those your two items?
Those are my 2 items.
Great. I want to remind, so next, we're gonna have to schedule 2 other executive sessions, just an FYI. One on bargaining and one on the complaint, to hear about that we have an active complaint. So we will probably next Wednesday schedule the executive session with Alma, and probably one of those executive sessions. And then one the following week. Will that work?
It depends when, like we should talk, well, I have job candidates coming into town the next, like 2 a week for the next
Okay.
2 weeks, so it may or may not.
This would be piggybacked on some of the April 6th and the April 13th possible meetings.
I think that should work.
Okay, great. We'll check before, but just so you know, those will need to be scheduled sooner rather than later, so. Okay, then I'm gonna say we are adjourned.